If you're enjoying this video, smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell. Share it with your friends and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Every like and subscribe helps the channel grow. Something's wrong with the forest. That was my first thought when I stepped out of my Ranger truck that November evening in 1973. The silence hit me like a physical thing. No birds calling, no insects chirping, nothing. Just dead leaves crunching. Under my boots and fog, rising off the Ohio River like ghostly fingers. My name is Malcolm Hayes. I'm the head ranger at McClintic Wildlife Management Area outside Point Pleasant, West Virginia. Most days, I love this job. Today wasn't most days. Everyone around here still talks about the Silver Bridge collapse from 6 years back. 46 people died when it fell during rush hour traffic. I still remember the screams, the twisted metal, the cars sinking into the icy river. Some folks say they saw something before it happened, something with wings and glowing red eyes. The locals call it the Mothman. I've always told them that's just superstition. Now I'm not so sure. As darkness crept in, I swept my flashlight across the trees. That's when I saw them, eyes reflecting in the beam, not low to the ground like a deer or coyote. These were at least 7 feet up, and they glowed red like embers. When I blinked, they were gone. My radio crackled with static as I moved deeper into the woods. In certain spots, the static almost sounded like whispered words I couldn't quite make out. I told myself it was just interference, but why did it only happen in specific clearings? The temperature dropped suddenly, at least 15 degrees colder, in one spot than 10 feet away. No wind, no explanation, just unnatural cold that made my breath cloud and my fingers ache. I nearly tripped over what looked like a massive depression in the forest floor, like something weighing hundreds of pounds. Had landed there, but there were no tracks leading to or away from it. Just a perfect impression pressed into the hard ground. Earlier that day, I'd gotten 3 calls from farmers about livestock found dead. Hearts removed with surgical precision, but no blood at the scene. The USDA guys had no explanation. As night fell completely, I heard it, the sound of enormous wings beating overhead. Powerful, rhythmic, like nothing native to these woods. I looked up but saw only clouds against the dark sky. Something's watching us, something's warning us. And I think it's been here before. Back at the ranger station, I sifted through my growing pile of reports. Strange lights, weird sounds, animals acting crazy. I've been documenting it all for 5 years now. Some might call it obsessive. My ex-wife Rebecca certainly did. You brought the war home with you, Malcolm, she told me the day she left, taking our daughter Sarah with her. They only live 20 minutes away in town, but it feels like miles. Maybe Rebecca was right. What I saw in Vietnam during night reconnaissance missions still haunts me, things my commanding officers ordered me to forget. Some nights the bourbon helps. Most nights it doesn't. I was staring at newspaper clippings spread across my desk when Deputy Ranger Jack Miller walked in, fresh-faced and eager like always. "Found anything that science can't explain yet, boss?" he asked with that smirk college graduates get when they think they know everything. "Science can't explain why you're still employed," I shot back, but there was no real heat in it. Jack was a good kid, just young. He hadn't seen enough to know how strange the world really is. The phone rang, saving me from Jack's comeback. "Ranger Station," I answered. "Malcolm, it's Diana Parker from the Point Pleasant Gazette." Diana was different from other reporters. Her brother died when the Silver Bridge collapsed. She wasn't looking for a story. She was looking for answers. "I've been connecting the dots," she said, her voice low and urgent. "These sightings, the ones you've been tracking, they're the same as before the bridge fell." I glanced at the newspaper clippings on my wall. Mothman sightings dating back to '66, always before something terrible happened. "I'm not saying I believe in monsters," Diana continued, "but something was trying to warn us before the bridge collapsed, and I think it's back." After we hung up, I pulled out the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet. Inside was a leather journal I'd found in my father's. Things after he died. He'd worked at a government facility near here in the 50s. The journal was full of strange observations and equations, but the pages marked Project Watchman had been torn out. That night, I dreamed of rushing water and red eyes watching from the dark. I woke up gasping, sheets soaked with sweat, the taste of river water in my mouth. Something was coming, something bad, and whatever was out there in the woods knew it. I found the feather on Tuesday morning. It was lying in the middle of a hiking trail, black as coal and nearly 2 feet long. No bird around here has feathers that size. Under my office microscope, it looked wrong somehow, more like an insect wing than a bird feather. "This isn't in any wildlife guide I've ever seen," I told Diana when she came by to look at it. She took photos, though I warned her they might not turn out. Cameras had been acting strange lately, pictures coming back blurry or completely black. 3. Hikers came into the station that afternoon, shaken and pale. They'd been camping near Miller's Creek when they saw something watching them from the trees. It had these eyes, the woman said, hugging herself tight. Red eyes, and it was shaped like a person, but bigger, with wings. Her voice dropped to a whisper. We all felt it, this awful feeling like something terrible was about to happen. Jack rolled his eyes behind their backs, but I noticed he didn't say anything. The next night on patrol, I lost 3 hours. 1 minute I was checking the North Ridge at 10:23 p.m., and the next thing I knew, my watch said 1:37 a.m., and I was 4 miles away with no memory of how I got there. My boots were caked with mud from the riverbank, though I had no reason to go there. When I tried to radio in, all I got was static and what sounded like backwards talking. My truck wouldn't start for nearly an hour. When it finally did, the dashboard clock was running backwards. Diana showed up at my door the next morning with a stack of police files. "How did you get these?" I asked, leafing through reports of red-eyed creature sightings from 3 different states. "I have sources," she said. "Look at the dates." Each sighting had happened in the weeks before a major disaster, a dam collapse. In Utah, a mine cave-in in Kentucky, a school fire in Ohio. "They're warnings," Diana said. "Whatever this thing is, it shows up before people die." That evening, Jack called in from his patrol, sounding worried for the first time since I'd known him. "I found something weird, boss. A perfect circle in the woods where everything's dead. And my Geiger counter is going crazy." I told him to mark the location and get out of there. When he didn't return by midnight, I called Sheriff Calhoun. We found Jack's truck, but no sign of him. 36 hours later, he wandered into a gas station 15 miles away, clothes torn, eyes vacant, repeating the same phrase over and over. "The angel of history has its back turned to the future." That same night, my daughter Sarah started sleepwalking. Rebecca called in a panic. She'd found our girl standing in the front yard at 3 a.m., staring toward the forest, drawing pictures of red eyes and broken bridges. The dreams got worse for me. 2. Every night I'd see water rushing through town streets. Every night I'd wake up choking, certain I was drowning. Something was trying to speak to us. We just didn't know how to listen yet. Diana called me early on Sunday with excitement in her voice. "I found something, Malcolm. Meet me at the old Fire Road entrance in an hour." The something turned out to be a concrete door built into the hillside, hidden behind thick brush that looked like it had been recently disturbed. The heavy metal door had strange symbols etched into it, shapes that reminded me of moths or insects. "What is this place?" I asked, as we shined our flashlights around the entrance. According to my research, it was a government facility in the 50s, the kind they don't put on maps. Inside, the bunker was cold and damp. Filing cabinets lined the walls, most empty but a few still containing folders with classified stamps. One room held what looked like medical equipment. Strange helmets with wires, speakers built into the walls, charts showing brainwave patterns. "Look at these," Diana said, pointing to a series of photographs. They showed test subjects exposed to something called targeted infrasound and electromagnetic pulse therapy. Their eyes in the photos looked strange, dilated and reflecting light like animals in headlights. "My God," I whispered. "They were experimenting on people." We took what documents we could carry and left, both feeling like we were being watched the whole time. Back at the station, I tried to make sense of what we'd found when the call came in about Jack. He had returned, but something was wrong with him. When I got to the hospital, he was strapped to a bed, pupils so wide his eyes looked black. "I saw it, boss," he said when he recognized me. "It showed me things that haven't happened yet." His voice dropped to a whisper. "It's not what we think. It's trying to help us." That night, Sheriff Calhoun killed himself. His deputy found him in his office with a note that simply read, "It's not trying to hurt us. It's trying to warn us." Strange men in black suits started showing up in town, asking questions about recent wildlife sightings. They had government IDs that even the sheriff's department couldn't verify. When they visited witnesses, electronic equipment nearby would fail. People reported headaches that lasted for days after talking to them. My radio picked up a strange transmission while I was near the river. Sounds like language, but like nothing I'd ever heard. When I played the recording for a professor friend at the university, he said it contained sounds from languages that hadn't been spoken in thousands of years. Meanwhile, Sarah's sleepwalking got worse. Rebecca finally agreed to let her stay with me for a few days. That night, my daughter sat up in bed at exactly 3:17 a.m. and spoke in a voice that wasn't hers. "The scare dam wants to break," she said, her eyes open but unseeing. "The water wants to come." I knew immediately which dam she meant, the hydroelectric project about 30 miles upstream that had been having structural problems all year. That evening, the biggest thunderstorm in years rolled in. Lightning split the sky, and in one brilliant flash, dozens of people across town saw the same thing. A massive winged figure silhouetted against the clouds, at least 7 feet tall with a wingspan twice that. The phones at the ranger station rang non-stop. The power grid failed across 3 counties, and something inside me knew we were running out of time. It happened on a Tuesday. I was checking the fence line near the old bunker when the air suddenly felt heavy, like before a storm, but worse. My ears popped, and I tasted metal in my mouth. Then I saw it. It stood at the edge of the clearing, 7 feet tall at least, with a massive wingspan that cast a shadow over everything. Its body was covered in what looked like dark, charcoal-colored skin that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. And its eyes, God, those eyes, they glowed red like hot coals, but somehow I knew they saw more than our eyes ever could. I couldn't move. My body shook like I was freezing, though sweat poured down my face. A feeling of pure dread washed over me, not fear exactly, but something deeper, like standing at the edge of a bottomless pit. The creature didn't attack. It just watched me. Then it tilted its head in a way that was almost human, and images flooded my mind. The dam upstream, hairline cracks spreading through concrete, water pressure building, and then destruction. Towns washed away, hundreds dead. I must have blacked out. When I came to, the thing was gone, but I knew what I'd seen wasn't a hallucination. Back at home, I found Sarah sitting at the kitchen table, drawing the exact same creature I'd just seen. "He visits me in my dreams, Daddy," she said without looking. He shows me things that are going to happen." I called Diana immediately. When she arrived, she brought a file I hadn't seen before. "I finally got access to my brother's personal effects from the bridge collapse," she said, spreading photos on the table. "He took these the week before it happened." The photos showed the same entity I'd seen, perched on the silver bridge. In the last photo, It appeared to be pointing at a specific section, exactly where the first chain link had failed. It wasn't causing the disaster, Diana said. It was trying to warn about it. That night, Jack showed up at my door, looking better, but changed somehow. His eyes had a new intensity. I found these in the station archives, he said, handing me a folder. Inside were documents about something called Project Watchman, the same project mentioned in my father's journal. According to the files in 1952, government scientists had been researching people with precognitive abilities. People who could sense disasters before they happened. Somehow, their experiments had attracted something from elsewhere. Not exactly from our world, but not completely separate either. The entity existed outside normal time, perceiving past, present, and future simultaneously. They couldn't control it, Jack said, but they found out certain bloodlines were more sensitive to its presence. He looked meaningfully at Sarah, who was asleep on the couch. Your father was part of the project, wasn't he? It all clicked into place. My father's mysterious government work, my own strange experiences in Vietnam, and now Sarah's connection to the entity. It's trying to communicate, I said slowly. But why now? Diana spread out a map on the table. I've been tracking infrastructure projects in the region. They're planning to expand the dam next month, which would flood this entire section of old-growth forest. Its habitat, Jack suggested. No, I said, remembering the visions. It's not about territory. The dam is going to fail. Soon. That night, people all over town reported seeing the entity, perched on rooftops, standing in yards, watching from the edge of the forest. No longer hiding, but appearing in plain sight, as if desperate to be noticed. As I put Sarah to bed, she grabbed my hand with surprising strength. It doesn't understand why we can't see what it sees, she whispered. The water is already rushing in its world. Dawn broke with dark storm clouds gathering. The weather report called for record rainfall, up to 8 inches in the mountains where the dam stood. I tried calling the dam authority but was brushed off. We've had engineers check everything just last month, the manager told me. The dam is perfectly sound. When I mentioned the creature sightings, he hung up on me. I drove to the sheriff's office where Deputy Collins had taken over after Calhoun's death. I spread out my evidence, the photos, the documents from the bunker, the pattern of sightings before disasters. You expect me to evacuate 3 towns based on a giant moth? Collins laughed. Hayes, I respect you, but this is crazy talk. Just send someone to check the dam, I pleaded. That's all I'm asking. We don't have the authority, he said. And even if I believed you, which I don't, causing a panic is a crime. When I got home, Sarah was gone. A half-finished drawing of the dam lay on her bed. I knew immediately where she'd gone. The forest was eerily still as I followed the path to the clearing where I'd first seen the entity. Rain had started to fall, heavy drops that seemed to hit the ground with unusual force. I found Sarah standing in the middle of the clearing, face turned to the sky, eyes open but unseeing. Sarah, I called, running to her. Honey, wake up! When she looked at me, her eyes reflected red in the dim light just for a moment. It's showing me, Daddy, she whispered. The wall is breaking. Behind her, the air seemed to bend and fold. The Mothman appeared, not gradually but all at once, as if it had always been there, and my eyes had just now decided to see it. Up close, I could see its body wasn't covered in feathers or fur, but something like an insect's exoskeleton. Its wings made a humming sound that vibrated in my chest. Sarah reached out and touched its arm without fear. The moment she did, I felt something like an electric current pass through me. Suddenly, I could see what it saw. The dam upstream with invisible pressure building behind concrete that was already cracking. I could see water beginning to seep through, feel the vibrations as the structure groaned, and most terrifying of all, I could see the time. Exactly 3 hours and 17 minutes until catastrophic failure. I grabbed Sarah and ran for my truck. "We need to warn everyone," I told her as we sped toward town. Diana was at the newspaper office. "The phone lines to the dam are down," she said when I burst in, "and there are government vehicles blocking the access road." "They know," I realized. "They're trying to prevent panic, but they're going to get people killed." Diana didn't hesitate. She grabbed the microphone for the emergency broadcast system that connected to the local radio station. "This is Diana Parker with an emergency warning," she announced. "The Hopkins Dam is showing signs of imminent failure. All residents in the following areas should evacuate immediately." Within minutes, men in suits arrived to shut down the station, but the message had already gone out. Jack called me from the ranger station. "The roads are jammed. People are scared. The authorities are saying your warning is a hoax." "I need to get to the dam," I told him. "I need to see for myself." "You'll never get past the roadblocks," he said, "but I might know another way." Jack met us at the Forest Service road that wound up the backside of the mountain to the dam's secondary control station. His ranger credentials got us through the first checkpoint. "The main control room is showing all systems normal," he told me as we drove. "But I talked to a friend who works maintenance. He says the monitoring equipment has been glitching for days." As we approached the dam, the rain came down in sheets. Lightning cracked across the sky, and in its flash we all saw it. The Mothman perched on top of the dam's concrete wall, wings spread wide. One of the security guards saw it too. He fired a shot, and chaos erupted. We used the distraction to slip into the control room. Inside, the monitors all showed green status, but when Jack cut power to the main systems, the backup readings told a different story. "My God," the technician on duty whispered. "The pressure gauges are in the red. The structural integrity is compromised. How did we miss this?" I looked out the window at the massive wall of water barely held in check. "You didn't miss it," I said. "Something wasn't letting you see it. They finally sounded the evacuation alarm, but I knew from the visions that for many it would already be too late." The wall of the dam didn't fail all at once. First came a crack near the base, sending a jet of water 100 feet into the air. Then part of the eastern section gave way with a sound like thunder. Engineers managed to open the emergency spillways, which saved the dam from complete collapse. But the partial failure sent a 15-foot wall of water rushing downstream, washing out bridges and flooding low-lying areas. Sarah and I watched. From the hillside, her hand tight in mine, the Mothman stood nearby, visible to us but seemingly invisible to the panicked workers running past. As the water rushed through, the entity's form began to fade, like a radio losing signal. Before it disappeared completely, I felt one last surge of images in my mind. Other places, other disasters, other warnings yet to come. Then it was gone, leaving only a faint impression in the mud where it had stood. 17 people died that day. Without the evacuation, hundreds would have perished. The official story came out a week later. Equipment failure combined with unprecedented rainfall had caused a controlled release from the dam. There was no mention of warnings, no mention of the entity, no credit given to those who had raised the alarm. Men in dark suits visited everyone who had reported seeing the Mothman. Witnesses found their photos missing, their recordings erased. Diana's newspaper office suffered a mysterious fire that destroyed her archives. When I tried to show the Project Watchman documents to a reporter from a national newspaper, I discovered my military record had been altered to include a psychiatric discharge. No one would take my story seriously now, but they couldn't erase everything. They couldn't erase Sarah's new awareness, the way she would sometimes stop and turn toward the forest, sensing something no one else could. They couldn't erase the bond that had formed between us through our shared experience. I kept my job as head ranger despite pressure to resign. Jack stayed too, though his career advancement mysteriously stalled. Diana started a small independent newsletter determined to preserve the truth even if few believed it. Years passed. Point Pleasant rebuilt. They even erected a silver statue of the Mothman in the town square, a tourist attraction that bore little resemblance to the entity we had actually seen. People took smiling photos beside it, bought Mothman t-shirts and coffee mugs, turning something profound and terrifying into something safe and commercial. But I kept watching. I maintained a hidden record of sightings around the world. Japan, Russia, Mexico, always before disasters, always trying to warn. I mapped the pattern, knowing that someday the entity might return here. 20 years later, I sat in a nursing home, my ranger days long behind me. The TV in the common room showed footage of a tsunami hitting a distant coastline. No one else noticed the dark figure visible for just a frame or two at the edge of the screen, wings spread wide against the coming wave. I recognized it immediately. Its work continued, warning those who could see, trying to save those who couldn't. Sarah visited that evening with her own daughter. As they walked in, the little girl stopped suddenly, looking toward the window with an odd expression. "What's wrong, Emma?" Sarah asked. "There's something out there," the child said, pointing to the empty air. "Something with red eyes." Sarah's eyes met mine across the room. The burden of knowledge passed to another generation. The cycle continued. Some warnings we hear, some we ignore, but the Mothman remains, forever watching from the silence between heartbeats, forever trying to bridge the gap between what is and what will be. A sentinel at the edge of disaster. Not a monster, a messenger. And some of us will always be listening. The cold hit me first. It always does up here. Even after 5 years as head ranger, I've never gotten used to the way Minnesota winter bites right through your clothes. I could see my breath hanging in the air as I moved through the trees, checking. Trap lines that morning. Something was wrong with the forest. I stopped and listened. Nothing, no birds calling. No squirrels rustling through the underbrush. Just silence and the soft crunch of my boots in the snow. "You hear anything, Max?" I whispered to my German shepherd. Max's ears were perked up, his body tense. He whined softly, looking deeper into the woods. I'd never seen him act this way before, and Max had been with me since Korea. The sun was just breaking over the horizon, painting the frozen lakes with colors that reminded me of the stained glass windows in my grandmother's church. Beautiful, but something about the silence made it feel wrong. I checked my watch. 7:15 a.m. Temperature was already dropping instead of rising with the sun. That wasn't normal, even for the boundary waters in January 1953. I adjusted my rifle, strap, and moved forward, following Max, who was now sniffing frantically at something in the snow. When I caught up, I froze. Tracks, but not like anything I'd seen before. They looked almost like deer hooves, but they were walking on 2 legs, and they were huge, easily twice the size of normal tracks. "What the hell made these?" I muttered. The radio at my hip crackled. "Frank, you copy?" It was the station calling. "I copy," I answered, still staring at the bizarre footprints. "Got another report of a missing trapper. 3rd one this month. You seeing anything unusual out there?" I looked at the tracks, then at Max, who was now growling at something I couldn't see. "Maybe," I said. "I'm going to check it out." As I followed, the tracks deeper into the woods, a smell hit me. Sweet but rotten, like meat gone bad, but somehow worse. It made my stomach turn. Max suddenly stopped, hackles raised, refusing to go further. The branches above me were snapped and broken too, high for any normal animal to reach. I felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up as the temperature suddenly plummeted. My thermometer read 30 degrees. Something was out there in my forest, something hungry, and I had the terrible feeling it knew my name. I trudged back to my cabin. As the sky darkened, The wind picked up, slicing through my coat like it wasn't even there. My thoughts kept returning to those strange tracks. My home wasn't much, just a ranger cabin with a wood stove, a desk piled high with reports, and a bed I rarely slept well in. Maps covered one wall, red pins marking where the trappers had gone. Missing. 3 pins formed a rough circle deep in the boundary waters. I hung up my coat, fed Max, and poured myself a finger of whiskey from the silver flask I kept in my desk drawer. The flask was a gift from my unit in Korea. Sometimes I wondered if I was the only one from that group still alive. The nightmares had been worse lately. In them, I was always back in those frozen Korean mountains, trapped with my men behind enemy lines, the cold, the hunger, the choices we made to survive, things I couldn't bear to remember when awake. I sipped the whiskey and stared at the photo on my desk, Sarah and little Rebecca smiling at a picnic long before I went to war. Before, I came back a different man. Before Sarah died and Rebecca stopped talking to me, her last letter lay unopened beside the photo. I already knew what it said, that I was never there, that the war took me away even after I came home, that her mother died while I was lost inside my own head. She wasn't wrong. The radio crackled to life. "Frank, you there?" It was Thomas from the southern station. "I'm here," I answered. "Heard you found something strange today." "Tracks, like nothing I've seen before." Thomas laughed. "Probably just a wolf with deformed paws. You've been alone up there too long, Frank." Maybe he was right. Maybe the isolation was getting to me. After signing off, I pulled out the station records, looking for anything similar in past reports. In the back of a filing cabinet, I found a worn journal from 1912. The ranger back then wrote about missing trappers too, and something called a winter walker from local Ojibwe legends. A knock at the door made me jump. Max barked once, then wagged his tail. Joseph Kingbird stood on my porch, snow dusting his shoulders. He was an Ojibwe elder who lived on the reservation south of my station. We'd spoken a few times when I first arrived. "You've seen the signs," he said. "Not a question." I let him in. "What signs?" "The hunger is awake again." Joseph's eyes were serious. "The Wendigo walks when the winter is coldest. It was once a man who ate human flesh and now hungers forever, growing with each victim." I wanted to dismiss it as superstition, but the tracks and broken branches flashed in my mind. "There are ways to protect yourself," Joseph continued, "but first you must believe." After he left, I stood by the window for a long time, staring into the darkness between the trees. I couldn't shake the feeling that something out there was, staring back, watching me with hungry eyes. Max whined at my feet. I reached down to scratch his ears. "It's just stories," I told him, "just old stories." But that night I checked the locks twice and kept my rifle closer than usual. I found the trapper's cabin 3 days later. The door hung from one hinge, torn off with force no human could manage. Inside was worse. "Stay, Max," I ordered. But he was already backing away, tail between his legs. The cabin was a mess. Table overturned, chairs smashed. Half-eaten breakfast still on plates. Like whoever was eating had to run mid-bite. Dark stains splattered the walls and floor. Blood. In the corner lay a hunting rifle, the barrel bent like it was made of rubber. My heart pounded as I followed a trail of blood that led from the cabin into the trees. The strange tracks were there again, deeper this time, like whatever made them was carrying something heavy. The blood trail stopped suddenly about 100 yards in. Just stopped, like someone had turned off a faucet. No body. Nothing. That's when I noticed the marks on the trees, symbols carved deep into the bark, circling the area where the blood disappeared. I took out my notebook and copied them as best I could. Back at my cabin, I tried calling the main station on the radio, but all I got was static and strange whispers I couldn't quite make out. Then, clear as day, I heard my name. "Frank!" The voice was wrong somehow, like many voices speaking at once. I slammed the radio off, my hands shaking. Joseph came by again that evening. I showed him my drawings of the tree symbols. Protection marks, he said quietly. Someone knew what was hunting them. What exactly is this Wendigo? I asked, finally ready to listen. It begins as a human who eats human flesh in the winter. The hunger changes them. They grow taller, stronger, hungrier with each meal. The older ones can call to you, make you hear things, make you hungry too. That's impossible, I said. Joseph just looked at me. You've seen something, haven't you? I hesitated, then told him about the figure I'd glimpsed watching me from the tree line yesterday, impossibly tall and thin, gone when I blinked. Your compass, Joseph said suddenly. It doesn't work right anymore, does it? He was right. My compass had been spinning wildly in certain parts of the forest, and it gets colder when it's near, he added. The hair on my arm stood up. I hadn't told anyone about the temperature drops. As if on cue, the temperature in my cabin plummeted. Our breath fogged the air. Max growled at the window. Outside, something moved between the trees. Too tall, too thin, not human. We need to set traps, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Get proof. Joseph nodded. I know where we can find old trail cameras, but Frank... His eyes were grave. Be careful. It knows you're looking for it now. That night, I found a deer in the clearing near my cabin. Its belly was torn open, organs removed and arranged in a circle around the body. Not eaten, displayed like a warning or an invitation. I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the cabin sounded like footsteps on the roof. Every gust of wind like something calling my name. Joseph and I set up trail cameras the next day. They weren't much, just simple tripwire cameras from the 1950s, but they were all we had. We placed them near the areas where the trappers had vanished. Will these even work? I asked, adjusting the final camera. If this thing is supernatural? Joseph shrugged. Maybe, maybe not. But we need to try something. 3 days later, we had our answer. The photos were blurry, but they showed something I couldn't explain away. A figure standing between the trees, at least 15 feet tall. Its head seemed to have branching antlers or horns. In one photo, it was looking right at the camera. The nightmares got worse after that. I dreamed of running through the forest, chasing something, hungry, so hungry. In the dreams, I caught people, tore them apart, and ate them. With each bite, I felt myself growing taller, the hunger growing stronger. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, the cabin freezing cold despite the roaring fire. One night, I heard scratching on the roof. Long, slow drags like massive claws. Max barked wildly, jumping at the ceiling. When morning came, I found no tracks in the snow around the cabin. Nothing could reach the roof without leaving prints. Joseph came by with herbs and small pouches of something that smelled like burnt sage. Hang these by your doors and windows, he said, showing me how to place them. The Wendigo was human once. These reminded of its humanity, keep it confused. As he worked, he explained more. The Ojibwe believe the Wendigo is born from greed and starvation. It eats and eats, but is never full. The more it eats, the bigger it gets, and the hungrier it becomes. How do we stop it? I asked. Joseph looked at me with tired eyes. Fire. Its heart must burn, but the heart isn't in its chest. It's behind the eyes. That's where the hunger lives. That night I took Max out on patrol. We checked the cameras again, replaced the film. Everything seemed quiet, too quiet. I whistled for Max as I packed up the gear, but he didn't come. Max, I called, my voice echoing between the trees. Nothing. I found his collar an hour later, lying in the snow beside a splash of dark blood. The trail led deeper into the woods, but I couldn't follow it in the dark. When I got back to the cabin, the radio was on, though I knew I'd left it off. Help me, Frank. It was the voice of Pete, one of the missing trappers. I'm hurt bad, in the old Johnson cabin. My hand hovered over the radio. Pete had been missing for weeks. "Frank, please," the voice continued, but something was wrong with it. It wavered between Pete's familiar drawl and something inhuman. I turned the radio off. The next morning, I found Joseph in the woods, gathering more protective herbs. He was lying in the snow, barely conscious, his skin covered in strange patterns of frostbite, perfect handprints of blackened flesh. "It touched me," he whispered when I got him back to my cabin. "It showed me things. So hungry, Frank, always hungry." He slipped in and out of consciousness, sometimes speaking in Ojibwe, sometimes just making sounds that weren't any language at all. That night, I saw it clearly for the first time. I was chopping more wood for the fire when I felt the temperature drop suddenly. The axe froze to my glove. The air turned so cold it hurt to breathe. It stepped from between the trees, a nightmare made real. 15 feet tall at least, its body skeletal and stretched, with grey skin pulled tight over elongated limbs. Its head was like a deer's skull, but wrong somehow, too large, with too many points on its antlers. Its eyes glowed a sickly yellow. When it saw me looking, it tilted its head and opened its mouth. The inside was black and seemed to go on forever. It had too many teeth. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Looking into those eyes, all I felt was hunger, a deep, terrible emptiness that needed to be filled. It knew my name. Somehow, I could feel it in my head, looking through my memories, seeing Korea, seeing the things we did to survive in those mountains. "You're already part mine," it seemed to say, though its mouth didn't move. I broke free of its gaze and ran for the cabin, slamming the door behind me. The protection herbs flared with a strange blue light, and outside the things screamed, a sound like metal tearing and animals dying all at once. Joseph was awake, his eyes clear for the first time in hours. "It's hunting you now," he said. "You've seen it. We're running out of time." The blizzard hit the next day, howling like a living thing around my cabin. Radio contact with the outside world went dead. We were on our own. Joseph was getting weaker, the frostbite spreading despite my best efforts to treat it, but his mind was clear. "It grows stronger in the storm," he told me. "It feeds on isolation and desperation." "Then we need to end this," I said, cleaning my rifle, though I knew bullets might not help. Joseph nodded weakly. "You'll have to draw it out to the place where the first trapper vanished." The plan was simple, born of desperation. I would use myself as bait, luring the Wendigo to the center of the frozen lake, where the ice was thinnest. Joseph, despite his injuries, would bring fire. "If you soak in its eyes for too long, you'll be lost," Joseph warned. "The hunger will take you too." I packed light, rifle, flare gun, matches, and Joseph's protective herbs. The storm was so thick I could barely see 10 feet ahead as I made my way to the lake. The silence came first. Even in the heart of the blizzard, the wind suddenly died. The snow hung suspended in the air. My breath froze in front of my face. Walked to the center of the lake, the ice creaking beneath my boots. "I know what you are," I shouted into the stillness. "I know you were human once." At first, nothing. Then the ice vibrated beneath my feet. Something was moving under the frozen surface, something massive. It erupted from the trees at the lake's edge, bigger now, at least 20 feet tall. Its body was skeletal, ribs protruding, through grey skin, but its belly was swollen and distended. It moved with jerking, unnatural speed, covering ground in impossible leaps. I raised my rifle, but couldn't pull the trigger. Those yellow eyes locked onto mine, and the hunger hit me. Like a physical blow, my mouth watered. My stomach clenched with emptiness. The Wendigo opened its mouth, and I heard the voices of the missing trappers screaming in unison, begging for help or mercy or death. "You're like me," it seemed to say inside my head. "Korea, the mountains, the choice you made." Images flashed in my mind. My unit trapped in the Korean mountains, our supplies gone, the decision we made to survive. The taste of... "No!" I screamed, breaking its hold on me. I fired the rifle, the bullets tearing chunks from its flesh, but not slowing it down. It leapt onto the lake, the ice cracking beneath its weight. I backed away, trying to lead it to the center where the ice was thinnest. My frost-bitten fingers fumbled with the flare gun as the creature stalked closer. The cold was overwhelming, my muscles seizing up, lungs burning with each breath. Suddenly, Joseph appeared at the edge of the lake, somehow standing despite his injuries. He held torches in both hands, the flames unnaturally bright in the swirling snow. "Here!" he shouted. "Over here!" The Wendigo turned, distracted by the fire it feared. Joseph waved the torches, chanting in Ojibwe, his voice strong despite his weakened state. The creature hesitated, caught between us. Then it charged at Joseph, covering the distance in 3 impossible strides. "No!" I screamed as it lifted Joseph with one clawed hand, impaling him on its antlers. Joseph didn't make a sound, but his eyes met mine one last time as he died. In that moment I saw what I needed to do. Joseph had given me my chance. As the Wendigo turned back to me, I aimed the flare gun directly at its face. Time seemed to slow as I pulled the trigger. The flare shot true, a streak of blazing red in the white storm. It hit the creature directly, in one glowing eye, burrowing deep inside its skull. For a moment nothing happened. Then its head burst into flames from within, the fire spreading down its neck and through its body. It thrashed wildly, those terrible voices shrieking in agony, the ice cracking beneath its massive form. With a final, human-like cry, it plunged through the ice and into the dark water below, fire still burning as it sank from sight. I don't remember much of my journey back to the cabin. The cold had taken 3 of my fingers and left my face scarred with frostbite. I radioed for help when the storm cleared, but I didn't tell them what really happened. Who would believe me? When spring came, the thaw revealed bodies in the ice. Some recent, some that had been there for decades. The official report blamed it on a rogue bear and the unusually harsh winter. I transferred south after that, to a ranger station in a warmer climate. But the nightmares never stopped. In them, I'm always hungry, always growing taller, always watching the cabin where I once lived. Sometimes I wonder if it's really dead, if the hunger can ever truly die. And sometimes, when winter comes, I think about that lonely cabin in the Boundary Waters, about the lost hikers who might stumble upon it, cold and starving, about the voice they might hear, promising food and warmth just beyond the tree line, a voice that knows their name. The first time I heard the knocking, I thought it was just a woodpecker. 3 sharp taps, then silence, then 3 more. But woodpeckers don't knock in patterns, and they don't follow you for miles through the misty forest. My name is Eleanor, Walsh Ellie to the few people I call friends, and in the summer of 1968, I became the lead ranger at Olympic National Park. The rainforest here is unlike anywhere else in America. Thick moss hangs from ancient trees like green beards, ferns carpet the ground, and a constant mist gives everything a dream-like quality. Some days, it feels more like an underwater kingdom than a forest. This morning started like any other. I laced up my boots before dawn, strapped on my ranger hat, and headed out for my patrol through the Hoh rainforest. My footsteps barely made a sound on the damp earth. After Vietnam, after losing so much, this quiet had been my salvation. Another day in paradise, I whispered to myself, breathing in the earthy scent of moss and decay. Not a bad smell, but a rich one. The kind that reminds you that life and death are just different sides of the same coin. But something felt off today. The forest seemed too alive, too aware. The moss appeared to pulse slightly, like it was breathing. Mushrooms I passed grew in perfect circles, like someone had carefully placed each one. Even stranger, I could swear the plants turned slightly to follow me as I walked by. I knelt down to examine a patch of unusual fungi when I spotted it, a footprint pressed deep into the mud. Not a bear, not a deer, not anything I'd seen in my Years of wilderness training. It measured nearly 2 feet long, with strange ridge patterns across what would be the soul. A chill ran up my spine despite the warm summer air. Lately, there had been reports of ape-like figures in the park. I'd dismissed them as hippies in costumes or kids on too many drugs. The counterculture movement had brought all types to our forests. Young people seeking peace, nature, and sometimes spiritual visions helped along by whatever they were smoking or swallowing. But this footprint wasn't made by any hippie. As I continued my patrol, I found one of the strange structures that had been appearing overnight, branches woven together in complex patterns that couldn't have formed naturally. No human could reach high enough to create this without equipment, and we would have noticed anyone bringing ladders into the park. "Eleanor, you're being ridiculous," I muttered to myself. "There's a logical explanation." But my words died in my throat as I stepped into a clearing, and all sound suddenly vanished. No birds, no insects, nothing. The silence was absolute, except for a deep, rhythmic vibration I felt in my chest, rather than heard with my ears. And that's when I noticed something even stranger. A pocket of mist that hung perfectly still while the rest swirled around it. No wind disturbed it, no sunlight penetrated it. It was as if that small section of forest existed by different rules. I'm a practical woman. I was a military nurse. I've seen men die. I don't believe in monsters or magic, but standing there, watching that unnatural mist, feeling that vibration in my bones, I couldn't stop the thought that pushed its way into my mind. Something is watching me, and whatever it wasn't human. Back at my cabin that evening, I spread out my maps on the wooden table. Red pins marked where I'd found those strange footprints. Blue ones showed the weird branch structures, yellow for spots where hikers claimed to see something big moving through the trees. The pins were forming a pattern, but I couldn't figure out what it meant. My cabin wasn't much, but it was home. One room with a bed, a desk, a tiny kitchen, and walls covered in maps and notes. Books on local wildlife filled my shelves. My brother Tom's photo sat by my bed, his last picture before going missing in Vietnam. Next to it was Jack, my fiancé, who never came home from the war. Their ghosts kept me company on lonely nights. A knock at the door made me jump. "Just me, Ellie," called a friendly voice. Gregory Martinez, the only other ranger who didn't think I was crazy. I let him in, and he whistled at my map. "Getting serious with this, huh?" Gregory was younger than me, just 28, with kind eyes and a quick smile. He handed me a cup of coffee and leaned against the doorframe. "Something's happening in this forest, Greg," I said. "And everyone thinks I'm just a jumpy woman seeing things." "Not everyone," he said. "David Blackfeather came by the station today. Said he wants to talk to you." David was from the local Kino tribe and worked with the park as a cultural guide. He knew the forest better than anyone. "Did he say why?" I asked. Greg shook his head. "Just that his grandfather used to tell stories about the forest having protectors, stick Indians and forest giants, I think he called them." I sipped my coffee, trying not to roll my eyes. I needed facts, not fairy tales. "We've got the university team coming tomorrow," Greg reminded me. "Dr. Wells and his crew. Maybe they'll find something." I groaned. Raymond Wells, the famous cryptozoologist, was the last person I wanted tramping through my forest. He was known for sensationalizing everything to get more funding. "They'll just scare whatever's out there deeper into hiding," I said. Greg smiled. "So you do think something's out there?" I didn't answer. The truth was, I didn't know what to think anymore. My military training taught me to trust observable facts. But how do you explain footprints that appear and disappear? Or the way I could navigate sections of forest in dense fog when other rangers got completely lost? The park supervisor called again. Greg said quietly, "He wants you to stop filing reports about unverified phenomena. Says it's scaring potential tourists." "Of course he does," I muttered. "Heaven forbid we put safety above tourism dollars." After Greg left, I sat on my porch watching darkness fall over the trees. The forest seemed to hold its breath at night, waiting, watching. The next day, I met David Blackfeather by the visitor center. His weathered face was serious as we walked along a quiet trail. My people have lived alongside the forest giants for thousands of years, he said without preamble. They were here long before humans. They protect the old growth. You mean Bigfoot? I asked, trying to keep the skepticism from my voice. David shook his head. That name trivializes them. They are guardians, not monsters. My grandfather was taken by them as a young man. I stopped walking. Taken? For 3 days. When he returned, he had knowledge of healing plants our tribe had never used before. He said they showed him things. David trailed off, looking into the mist-shrouded trees. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because they've noticed you, Eleanor Walsh. The way you treat the forest with respect, the way you can find paths others cannot. He turned to face me. And because I think they're worried. About what? About the man who is coming to hunt them, the one with the cameras and traps. A chill ran through me as I realized he meant Dr. Wells. As if on cue, I heard vehicles pulling into the parking lot. The university research team had arrived. David gripped my arm. Be careful who you trust, Ranger Walsh. Not all monsters. Walk on 2 feet. And not all 2-legged beings are human. Dr. Wells wasted no time setting up his operation. By afternoon, his team had unloaded vans full of equipment. Cameras, sound recorders, plaster for footprint casts, and metal cages. That made my stomach turn. Just precautionary, Wells explained when he caught me staring at the cages. He was tall and thin, with wire-rimmed glasses and a forced smile that never reached his eyes. In case we find an injured specimen. These aren't animals you're dealing with, I said, surprising myself with my words. Wells raised an eyebrow. Oh? And what exactly are they, Ranger Walsh? I didn't have an answer. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m., I grabbed my flashlight and jacket and headed into the forest. The moon was bright enough to cast shadows between the trees, and the mist swirled around my ankles like water. I found myself drawn to Area 14, a section of old-growth forest where we'd had the most reports. As I walked, I noticed how quiet it was. No owls, no rustling of night creatures, just the soft sound of my boots on the damp earth. Then I heard it. Knock, knock, knock. Pause. Knock, knock, knock. I froze, listening. The knocks came again, but from a different direction. Then another set from somewhere else. They were surrounding me. Hello? I called, my voice sounding small in the vastness of the trees. The knocking stopped immediately. The silence that followed was worse somehow. Just as I was about to head back, I spotted a deer standing about 50 feet away. It was perfectly still, staring right at me. Not scared, not ready to bolt, just watching. As I took a step toward it, it continued to stare, unmoving. That's not right, I whispered. The next morning, 2 hikers stumbled into the ranger station, pale and shaking. They'd been camping near Elk Lake when they started hearing tree knocks all around them. Every time they tried to hike in one direction, the knocks would get louder and more aggressive until they turned another way. It was like something was herding us, the woman said, her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee I'd given her. Did you see anything? I asked. The man shook his head. Just shadows, but big ones, and we kept finding these weird stick arrangements appearing around our camp overnight. I nodded. I'd seen those stick structures too. Later that day I took Greg with me to check out a campsite that had been abandoned. 3 young hippies had registered for a week, but hadn't checked out. Their car was still in the lot. What we found chilled me to the bone. The tents were still there, perfectly intact. A pot of beans sat on a portable stove, half-cooked. Backpacks lay open, but there was no sign of struggle, no blood, nothing to suggest panic. Maybe they just went for a hike, Greg suggested. I pointed to their personal items, watches, wallets, a camera, arranged in a perfect geometric pattern on a flat rock. Does that look like something people would do before going on a casual hike? Greg swallowed hard. No, it doesn't. As we packed up their belongings to take back to the station, I noticed something strange about the forest around us. The trees seemed to be leaning in, as if listening. The birds had gone silent again. Greg, I said quietly, have you noticed the bears avoiding this area? He nodded slowly. Not just bears, all the big wildlife. It's like they know something. We don't. Back at headquarters, we filed our report. The park supervisor read it with a frown. Campers leave all the time without checking out, he said, dismissing our concerns. And this nonsense about arranged items, they were probably just high. Sir, I pressed, something unusual is happening in these woods. Enough, Walsh, he snapped. Dr. Wells is bringing attention to our park. Good attention, funding attention. I don't want to hear any more about mysterious happenings scaring away visitors. That evening, Dr. Wells showed me his first batch of footage from the automatic cameras. Most showed nothing unusual. Wind in the trees, a raccoon, normal forest, scenes. But the last one made my blood run cold. The camera had been placed facing a moonlit clearing. At first, nothing seemed out of place. Then slowly, a section of what I had thought was a moss-covered tree trunk began to move. It separated from the tree, revealing what looked like a massive, upright figure, at least 9 feet tall. The figure stood perfectly still for nearly a minute, looking directly at the camera. Then it reached out with what appeared to be a long, powerful arm, and the video went dead. The camera was found dismantled, Wells said, his voice filled with excitement rather than fear. Not smashed or broken, carefully taken apart and placed in a neat pile. That's not an animal, I whispered. No, Wells agreed, his eyes gleaming. It's much more interesting than that. The next morning I woke to frantic knocking on my cabin. A door. It was Louise, one of our junior rangers, her eyes wide with panic. It's Gregory, she said. He didn't come back from his night patrol. My heart sank. Greg had been checking Area 14 last night, the same place where we'd found the most footprints and stick structures. We organized search parties immediately. I led the main team, while David Blackfeather took another group through the western trails. Dr. Wells insisted on bringing his researchers along. This could be our chance, he whispered to one of his assistants, not realizing I could hear him. If something took him, I wanted to punch him. The forest felt different that day, hostile almost. Compass needles spun uselessly, radio communications cut in and out. Even the most experienced rangers seemed confused about trails they'd walked. 100 times. We've been walking for 3 hours, said Richards, checking his watch. That can't be right. I looked at my own watch. He was right, but it felt like we'd only been searching for maybe an hour. Time itself seemed to be playing tricks on us. As we pushed deeper into Area 14, the mist grew thicker until we could barely see 20 feet ahead. The trees here were ancient giants, their trunks wider than cars, their tops lost in the fog above. Moss hung in thick curtains, and mushrooms of impossible colors sprouted from fallen logs. Ellie, Richards called, his voice strange. Look at this. On the ground was a clear footprint, like the ones I'd been finding, but fresh. Next to it was a familiar boot print. That's Greg's boot, I said, my mouth dry. We followed the trail of footprints, the giant ones and Greg's side by side, until they vanished at the edge of a small stream. As night approached, David insisted, we leave before dark. It's not safe, he said firmly. The forest protects its own at night. Back at the ranger station, David pulled me aside. I need to do a blessing ritual, he explained, for Gregory's protection and ours. Do you think these things, these forest giants, have him? I asked. David's face was grave. Yes, but not to harm him. They're guardians, Ellie. They protect the forest from threats. Then why take Greg? He loves these woods. perhaps to show him something, or... David hesitated, perhaps because of who he was with. My mind flashed to Dr. Wells and his cages. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. I slipped out to Dr. Wells' campsite, intending to talk to him about scaling back his operation. Until we found Gregory. The researchers' tents were dark, but a light burned in Wells's trailer. The door was slightly ajar. Inside, I could see Wells hunched over a journal, scribbling frantically. Maps covered his walls, similar to mine, but with different markings. His looked more like military operation plans than research notes. I leaned closer, trying to see what he was writing. His journal was open to a page titled Project Guardian, Bioweapon Potential of Olympic Forest Entities. My blood ran cold. Wells wasn't here to study or protect anything. He was assessing these creatures as weapons. A twig snapped behind me. I whirled around to find one of Wells' assistants staring at me. "You shouldn't be here, Ranger Walsh," he said coldly, his hand moving towards something in his jacket. I backed away, just checking if Dr. Wells had any updates on the search. The man's eyes didn't blink. "The doctor is very busy. We'll let you know if we find anything." I returned to my cabin, but couldn't shake the feeling of dread. Around midnight, I made a decision. I grabbed my pack, flashlight, and a small handgun I kept locked in my desk, a souvenir from my military days I rarely touched. If I was going to find Greg, I needed to go alone. Without Wells or his team knowing, the forest at midnight was another world entirely. The mist glowed faintly with bioluminescent fungi. The massive trees creaked and groaned like they were speaking to each other. The knocking sounds started almost immediately, but tonight they didn't feel threatening. They felt like guidance. I followed them deeper into the forest than I'd ever gone before. The mist parted in front of me like a curtain, then closed behind me. I should have been terrified, but strangely I felt calmer than I had in days. In a small clearing, I stopped dead in my tracks. Standing about 30 feet away was a figure that would haunt my dreams forever. Nearly 10 feet tall, with broad shoulders and long, powerful limbs. It was covered in mossy fur, but beneath the covering, patterns of light pulsed gently, like glowing veins. Its face was surprisingly gentle, deep-set eyes that reflected the moonlight, a broad nose, a mouth that seemed almost human, but not quite. It made no move toward me, just watched me with those ancient eyes. And then something impossible happened. Without speaking, it put an image in my mind, a clear vision of Gregory, alive, lying in what looked like a cave, covered in a blanket of moss. Next came flashes of destruction, chainsaws tearing through ancient trees, rivers clogged with industrial waste, animals fleeing from men with guns. The creature was showing me why it feared humans. The final image was of Dr. Wells, with strange equipment, standing over what appeared to be a smaller version of these creatures, strapped down and in obvious distress. The vision broke, and I gasped, stumbling backward. The creature hadn't moved, but I could feel its sadness and anger washing over me like waves. "I won't let that happen," I whispered. "I'll help you." Behind me came the sound of breaking branches and men's voices. Flashlight beams cut through the darkness. "There! I see something," shouted a voice I recognized as one of Wells' researchers. The creature melted back into the forest with surprising speed for something so large. I ran after it, not caring that I was heading deeper into unknown territory. I just knew I couldn't let Wells find it. But I was too late. A different sound filled the air, the whump, whump, whump of helicopter blades. A spotlight cut through the canopy ahead, and I heard Dr. Wells' excited voice through a megaphone. "We've got one! Tranquilizers ready!" The forest around me seemed to shake with fury. I ran toward the sound of the helicopter, branches whipping my face, roots seeming to rise up to trip me. It was like the forest itself was trying to slow me down. The trees opened suddenly into a larger clearing, What I saw there stopped me cold. Dr. Wells and two of his men stood with tranquilizer guns, surrounding what looked like a smaller version of the creature I'd seen. A juvenile, maybe 7 feet tall instead of 10. It was backed against a rock wall, its mossy covering bristling. The lights beneath its skin pulsing rapidly in what I somehow knew was fear. The helicopter hovered above, its spotlight trained on the scene, rotors whipping the mist into a frenzy. "Don't move," I shouted, drawing my handgun. "Step away from it." Wells turned to me, his face twisted in an expression I'd never seen before. A mixture of scientific excitement and something darker. "Ranger Walsh," he called over the noise. "Perfect timing. You can be the first government witness to the greatest zoological discovery of the century." "This isn't a discovery," I said, moving closer. "It's a kidnapping. You need to leave, now." Wells laughed. "Leave? Do you have any idea what these creatures are worth? The military applications alone? That's what this is about, weapons." I was close enough now to see the fear in the young creature's eyes. "Among other things," Wells said. He nodded to one of his men who raised his tranquilizer gun toward the juvenile. I fired my handgun into the air. The sound echoed through the clearing and everyone froze. "The next one won't be a warning shot," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. That's when I noticed something strange happening around us. The forest floor was moving. Roots were snaking across the ground. Vines were growing visibly, inching up the legs of Wells's men. The mist was thickening, swirling with purpose. Wells saw it too. His confident smile faltered. Above us, the helicopter pilot shouted something I couldn't hear. The craft tilted dangerously as vines shot upward, wrapping around its landing skids. "What is this?" one of Wells's men cried, trying to free himself from the creeping plants. The ground beneath our feet trembled. From the trees all around us, massive figures emerged, 8, 10, maybe more of the creatures, forming a circle around the clearing. The largest stepped forward, its bioluminescent patterns glowing bright blue in anger. Wells raised his radio. "Base camp! We need backup! Military extraction now!" I lunged forward and knocked the radio from his hand. "No! You don't understand what you're dealing with." Too late, I saw the glint of metal as Wells pulled a real gun from his jacket. Pain exploded in my shoulder as the shot rang out. I fell to my knees, warm blood soaking my ranger shirt. What happened next, I'll never fully understand. The largest creature raised its arms, and all the others did the same. The very air seemed to vibrate. The trees bent inward, their branches intertwining above us to block the helicopter's escape. The ground split in several places, and glowing. Fungus erupted, sending spores into the air. Wells screamed as vines wrapped around his legs, then his torso, not killing him but holding him still. His men dropped their weapons, their eyes wide with terror. "Ellie!" The voice was weak but familiar. Gregory stumbled into the clearing from between two massive trees, looking dazed but unharmed. His clothes were covered in the same moss as the creatures, and there was a strange clarity in his eyes I'd never seen before. "They're not what we thought," he said, coming to help me to my feet. My shoulder burned, but the bleeding wasn't as bad as I'd feared. "They showed me. They've been here for thousands of years. They're connected to the forest in ways we can't understand." The largest creature approached Wells, who struggled uselessly against his bonds. It placed one enormous hand on his forehead. Wells went rigid, his eyes rolling back, his mouth open in a silent scream. "What are they doing to him?" I asked. "Showing him the truth," Gregory said, "the way they showed me. But his mind, it might not survive it. They're so old, Ellie, so powerful. They can speak through the trees, through the mushrooms underground. Everything in this forest is connected, and they're the center of it all." Thunder cracked overhead. Impossible, given the clear night sky we'd had earlier. A storm was forming. Directly above the park, clouds swirling with unnatural speed. The creature removed its hand from Wells, who collapsed to the ground, twitching and mumbling incoherently. In my mind, I heard a voice, not in words exactly, but in feelings and images. I somehow understood. They are coming. More humans with weapons. You must go. The military, I realized. Wells called them before we got here. The lead creature nodded, then looked at my bleeding shoulder. It approached slowly, and I forced myself not to back away. Its massive hand, surprisingly gentle, touched my wound. A cooling sensation spread through my arm as moss and fungi grew over the injury, stopping the bleeding instantly. Gregory helped me up. We need to get everyone out of here, now. The creatures released Wells's men, who scrambled away in terror. The helicopter pilot had managed to cut free of the vines and was frantically trying to restart his engine. What about Wells? I asked, looking at his still form on the ground. They'll deal with him, Gregory said, his voice strange. As we left the clearing, I looked back one last time. The creatures had formed a circle around Wells. The forest floor beneath him was shifting somehow like quicksand, but made of moss and roots. He was sinking into it, the plants growing over him. I should have been horrified, but somehow I knew he wasn't being killed. He was being transformed. We managed to get everyone out. Just as the storm hit with impossible force, lightning struck throughout the forest, but strangely, no fires started. The park was closed immediately. Military vehicles arrived by dawn, but the storm made it impossible for them to enter the deeper areas of the forest. Government officials confiscated all of Wells' research and equipment. They took statements from everyone, but most of Wells's team couldn't remember what had happened, just vague impressions of being lost in the woods. Gregory and I remembered everything, but we quickly learned to keep the details to ourselves. My shoulder healed with unusual speed, leaving a scar shaped like a fern frond. And sometimes, when I touch plants, they grow a little faster than they should. Wells was found 3 months later, wandering naked on a logging road 50 miles from the park. His hair had turned completely white and he couldn't speak, just make strange humming sounds. Most disturbing were the patches of moss growing from his skin that couldn't be removed. He spent the rest of his life in a government facility. The park reopened eventually, but large sections were declared off limits for environmental recovery. Hikers still report being watched, still hear those rhythmic knocks when they stray too close to restricted areas. They always find their way back to the trails, gently guided by sounds and subtle changes in the mist. I stayed on as lead ranger until I retired 20 years later. The creatures never revealed themselves to me again, but sometimes, on my solitary patrols, I would find small gifts left on stumps. Unusual flowers, perfectly arranged stones, once a carving of a ranger hat that I still keep beside my bed. 40 years later, my hair now as white as the mist, I returned to Olympic National Park one last time. My legs aren't what they used to be, but I knew the path. I walked slowly to the edge of Area 14, now permanently closed to the public. Standing at the boundary, I waited. The forest was quiet, that special kind of quiet I remembered so well. Then I heard it. Knock, knock, knock. The mist before me parted like a curtain, revealing a path I'd never seen before. And at the end of it, massive figures waited there. Bioluminescent patterns glowing in welcome. I smiled and stepped forward into the mist, going home at last. That morning, the water was too quiet. I've spent my whole life on Lake Champlain, and when the lake goes silent like that, it means something's wrong. My name is Marcus Reynolds. I'm 45 years old and the senior park ranger here on Lake Champlain, right where Vermont meets New York. Being a ranger wasn't really a choice for me. It's what my dad did and his dad before him. Reynolds' men watch over the lake. That's just how it is. The morning mist was thick as soup as I guided my small ranger boat across the glassy water. The lake was perfectly still, creating mirror images of the trees and mountains. It was beautiful, but that stillness made the hairs on my neck stand up. Another perfect day in paradise, I muttered to myself, checking my watch. 5:30 a.m. The early summer campers and fishermen wouldn't be out for another hour at least. I cut the engine and drifted, watching ripples form on the surface. They weren't coming from my boat. Something was moving deep below. 3 weeks now, we'd been getting strange sonar readings from the deepest parts of the lake. Lake Champlain goes down over 400 feet in some spots. Plenty of room for secrets. I pulled out my sonar device and switched it on. The screen flickered with nonsense, just like yesterday. Whatever was down there was messing with our equipment. My radio crackled. "Marcus, you out there?" It was Victoria, my deputy ranger. "I'm here. Anything new? Those water samples we took yesterday? The lab says the oxygen levels are way down, and they found minerals that shouldn't be in a lake this size. Something's happening down there." I looked across the water at the growing line of tourist boats gathering near the shore. Ever since the Champ sightings started increasing last month, tourism had exploded. Everyone wanted to see Lake Champlain's version of the Loch Ness monster. "Keep this between us for now," I told Victoria. "Last thing we need is to scare off the tourists." What I didn't tell her was that 3 fishing boats had already reported strange damage to their hulls. Clean, precise holes that looked like something had punched through the metal. The marine engineers were stumped. I steered toward Miller's Cove, where the deep water fish had suddenly started appearing in the shallows. Pike, lake trout, and other species that normally stay deep were now swimming right up near the surface. Nobody could explain why. As I rounded the bend, I spotted the group of college kids who'd been camping for the past week. They waved at me, excitedly. "Ranger Reynolds," one of them called out. "We saw the lights again last night." I pulled my boat closer. "What kind of lights?" "Blue-green, under the water, moving together like they were dancing or something. We got videos this time." The kid held up his camera. I'd seen the lights myself 3 nights ago. Strange bioluminescence, moving in patterns too orderly to be random. No fish or algae I knew could do that. "I'll take a look," I promised, though I doubted the video would show much. The lights only. They appeared clearly when you saw them with your own eyes. I continued my patrol, checking in with early morning fishermen. None had caught anything, which was unusual for this time of year. "It's like the fish know something we don't," an old-timer named Bill told me. He'd been fishing these waters longer than I'd been alive. Lakes keeping secrets, Marcus. By mid-morning, I pulled back into the ranger station dock. The small wooden building had been here since the 1940s, filled with my family photos, scientific equipment, and 3 generations of records about Lake Champlain phenomena. My grandfather started the records, my father continued them, and now they were mine to maintain. I went straight to the map table and marked the new areas where the sonar had malfunctioned. When I connected the dots, they formed an arc around the deepest channel of the lake, exactly where my grandfather had disappeared back in 1938. The phone rang. It was my ex-wife. "Noah's train gets in at 4, she said without greeting. "Are you sure you can handle him for the whole summer? He's been having trouble at school." "He's my son," I said firmly. "We'll be fine." After I hung up, I stared at the calendar. Having my teenage son here would complicate things. Noah was curious, smart, and had my stubborn streak. Keeping him away from whatever was happening in the lake would be nearly impossible. I switched on the radio and heard the excited chatter of tourists spotting something near Bulwaga Bay. They were all convinced they'd seen Champ. Maybe they had. Looking out the window at the deceptively peaceful lake, I felt a chill. The water rippled in that particular way again, from below, not from wind. Something was rising from the depths, and after 3 generations of watching this lake, I knew one thing for certain. Lake Champlain was about to give up one of its secrets. whether we were ready for it or not. The old station clock ticked loudly as I waited for Noah's train. My fingers drummed against the steering wheel of my truck, mind still on those strange ripples in the lake. Noah stepped off the train looking taller than when I'd seen him at Christmas. 15 now, with that half-child, half-man look that made my chest tighten. He wore his hair longer, his backpack slung over one shoulder. "Hey, Dad," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Good to see you, son." I wanted to hug him, but settled for a pat on the shoulder. Hungry? The diner by the lake was nearly empty. We sat by the window, the water visible beyond the parking lot. We stumbled through the usual questions: school, friends, his mother. The silence between answers grew longer each time. "So," Noah finally said, picking at his fries, "Mum says you're still obsessed with lake monsters." I winced. That had been the final straw in our marriage. My unhealthy fixation, as she called it. "I'm doing my job," I said carefully. "There are things happening in the lake that need explaining. Like Champ?" His eyes finally lit up with interest. "Tommy Watkins said his cousin got a picture of something huge near Bulwaga Bay last month." "People see all kinds of things," I said. "Some real, some not. But you believe there's something there, right? That's why you and Mom split up." The bluntness caught me off guard. "It's more complicated than that, Noah." "Is it?" He looked out at the lake. "You chose this over us." The drive home was quiet. The ranger station had a small apartment upstairs where we lived. Noah headed straight for his room, the same one I had as a kid. Later that evening, Victoria stopped by with Lake. Water samples. She froze when she saw Noah. "You must be the famous Noah," she said with a smile. "Your dad talks about you all the time." Noah looked surprised. "He does?" Victoria was good with him, asked about his interests without talking down to him. She was a marine biologist before becoming a ranger, and soon she had Noah fascinated by her stories of strange deep-water creatures. "Your dad and I are trying to figure out why the fish patterns have changed," she explained, showing him charts on her tablet. "Everything's upside down. Deep fish coming up, shallow fish going deep." "Is it because of Champ?" Noah asked. Victoria glanced at me. "We don't know what's causing it." After she left, Noah seemed more relaxed. "She's nice," he said. "Is she your girlfriend?" "She's my deputy," I corrected. "And a scientist. She's helping me understand what's happening in the lake. So you really do think something's out there?" I hesitated, then walked him to my office. The walls were covered with maps, charts, and a corkboard full of photos and notes stretching back decades. I've been tracking unusual sightings and events for over 20 years, I admitted. But it started with my grandfather, then my dad. Noah studied the wall. "You never told me about this. Your mother thought it would affect you somehow." He touched a photo from 1938. "Is this your grandfather?" The day before, he disappeared. On the lake, they never found him or his boat. "What do you think happened to him?" I sighed. "That's what I've been trying to figure out my whole life." The next morning, I took Noah to visit my father at Pine Shores nursing home. Dad was having one of his bad days, staring out the window, barely recognizing us. At 78, he drifted in and out of dementia, living more in the past than the present. "Lake's stirring," he suddenly said, grabbing my arm with surprising strength. "You feel it, don't you?" "Yes, Dad, I feel it. The deep channel," he whispered. "That's where they stay. That's where they took him." Noah looked alarmed. "Who's they, Grandpa?" Dad's eyes cleared for a moment, fixing on Noah with startling clarity. "The watchers of the lake, the ones who were here before us." Then he slipped away again, humming softly to himself. In the car, Noah was quiet. "Has Grandpa always talked like that?" "Only in the last few years," I said. "But my whole life he warned me about the deep channel, made me promise never to go. There alone. And did you go there? More times than I can count, I admitted. Never found anything, but lately... What? Things are different. The lake feels awake somehow. That afternoon, I introduced Noah to John Running Water, an Abenaki, tribal elder who often helped with educational programs at the lake. John's family had lived by these waters for countless generations. The people tell stories of the serpent spirits, John told Noah as we sat on his porch overlooking the lake. Not monsters, but guardians. They protect the sacred waters and only reveal themselves when the balance is disturbed. What kind of balance? Noah asked. John looked meaningfully at me. The old kind, between what belongs above and what belongs below. As we were leaving, John pulled me aside. There's a government man asking questions about the lake, staying at the motel in town. What kind of questions? About water quality, he says, but he's more interested in the deep spots and the recent sightings. Sure enough, the next day, a man in a crisp button-down shirt and khakis showed up at the ranger station. Dr. Howard Phillips, he said, from the Environmental Protection Agency. Just routine monitoring, he explained, shaking my hand, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Mind if I set up some equipment on the North Shore? What kind of equipment? I asked. Water quality monitors, nothing intrusive. But later, when I checked, the boxes he was unloading had military serial numbers, and the water monitors looked suspiciously like advanced sonar arrays. That night I couldn't sleep. Standing at my window, I watched the lake under the full moon. There, just for a second, a line of blue-green lights moved in perfect formation beneath the surface, blinking in a pattern that seemed almost like a message. Whatever was down there, it wasn't just swimming anymore, it was trying to communicate. The next morning, my office phone wouldn't stop ringing. A tourist had taken photos of something in the lake, something big. I was trying to calm down the fifth caller when Noah appeared in the doorway, eyes still puffy with sleep. What's going on? He asked, yawning. I hung up the phone. Someone got a picture of something in the lake. The tourists are going crazy. By noon, the photo was everywhere, posted in shop windows, shared on phones, even printed on hastily made T-shirts in the gift shop downtown. I finally got my hands on the original from Mrs. Denman, a retired teacher from Ohio who'd been taking sunrise pictures. The image showed what looked like a massive snake-like shape just under the water. If the scale was right, the thing was at least 30 feet long. I only saw it for a second, Mrs. Denman kept saying. I wasn't even looking at the water when I took the picture. Victoria examined the photo carefully. Could be a log, she said, but didn't sound convinced. Or a group of fish swimming in formation, I added. Or, Noah said from behind us, it could actually be Champ. I gave him a look. Don't you have that book to read for summer school? This is way more interesting. He wasn't wrong. Later that afternoon, Victoria and I took the boat out to check a section of the lake where fishermen had reported unusual. The sonar readings. We brought our best equipment, including an underwater camera. Depth is changing, Victoria said, frowning at the sonar. That can't be right. I looked over her shoulder. The reading showed the lake floor shifting from 200 feet to 300 feet and back again, as if it was moving. Equipment malfunction, I suggested. She shook her head. I checked it this morning. We dropped anchor and lowered the camera. The water was clear for about 50 feet, then turned murky. At 100 feet, the camera light caught something that made both of us freeze. Is that an opening? Victoria whispered. The image showed what looked like a cave entrance in the rock wall of the lake, a perfect arch with strange markings carved around it. It wasn't on any map I'd ever seen of the lake bed. Pull it up, I said, suddenly uneasy. We need better equipment. As the camera rose, something large moved across the screen, just a shadow, but big enough to make Victoria gasp. The next day, I showed the video to John Running Water. The underwater people, he said after watching it twice. The old stories. Talk about them? Underwater people? Noah asked. He'd insisted on coming along. John nodded slowly. Our legends say they could take human form or serpent form. They lived in hidden places beneath the water, but would sometimes visit the surface world. Were they dangerous? Noah asked. Not dangerous, John said. Different. They had different rules, different ways. They could be helpful or harmful, depending on how humans treated the lake. The carvings around the cave entrance, I said. Can you make sense of them? John studied the frozen image. Ancient symbols. Some are Abenaki, but others I've never seen before. He pointed to one mark that looked like a spiral. This means a doorway between worlds. That night, I had patrol duty. Noah begged to come along, and against my better judgment, I agreed. As long as he stayed in the boat and did exactly what I said. The lake was dead calm, the moon casting a silver path across the water. Noah sat, huddled in his jacket, eyes wide as we cruised slowly past the dark shoreline. Will we see anything? He whispered. Probably just campers breaking quiet hours, I said, sweeping my flashlight across the water. We'd been out for about an hour when I cut the engine to listen. The lake sounds were familiar, small waves lapping against the boat, the occasional splash of a fish. But then something else caught my attention. A faint humming from beneath us. Do you hear that? I asked Noah. Before he could answer, we saw them. Green-blue lights moving under the surface, dozens of them, forming perfect circles and lines. Dad, Noah breathed. What is that? I don't know. The lights pulsed in a rhythm, like heartbeats. They circled our boat, then began forming more complex patterns, triangles, spirals, and shapes I couldn't name. They're dancing, Noah said in awe. Then, as suddenly as they appeared, the lights dove deeper and vanished. We sat in stunned silence for several minutes before I started the engine. As we headed back, Noah kept looking over his shoulder at the water. They knew we were there, he said. They were showing off for us. I couldn't disagree. The next day, Noah went kayaking with some kids from town, Emmett and Lisa, whose parents ran the bait shop. I made them promise to stay in the bay, away from the deep water. 3 hours later, they came rushing into the ranger station, talking over each other in excitement. We saw it, Emmett shouted. It was huge! Like a dinosaur, Lisa added. Noah was quieter, holding a Polaroid photo carefully by its edges. It came up right next to us, he said, just for a second. The photo showed nothing but strangely shaped waves. A wake pattern I'd never seen before, forming a V that would have needed something massive to create it. Did you feel scared? I asked them. They looked at each other, then shook their heads. It felt like it was checking us out, Noah said, like it was curious. That evening, Victoria called me to the dock where she'd set up her recording equipment. She'd left underwater microphones in several parts of the lake and had been monitoring them for days. Listen to this, she said, pressing play. The sounds that came from her speakers made the hair on my arms stand up. Low, rhythmic pulses, interspersed with higher clicks and whistles, almost like speech. That's not fish, I said. Not fish, not a whale, not any aquatic mammal I've ever heard. Victoria looked troubled. These patterns repeat. Look at the wavelength analysis. Her computer showed the sound waves forming consistent patterns that changed in predictable sequences. Almost like language, she finished. It shows all the mathematical hallmarks of language. We were still analyzing the recordings when my father called, or rather, the nurse at his facility called. Dad was having a lucid spell and was demanding to see me immediately. I found him sitting upright in bed, alert and clear-eyed for the first time in months. You've stirred them up, he said as soon as I walked in. I can feel it. Feel what, Dad? The watchers. They're awake now. He grabbed my hand. Our family has always been the chosen ones, Marcus, for generations. We don't just watch the lake. We watch them. What are they, Dad? The old ones, they were here before us and they'll be here after. They live in the deep places. His eyes grew distant. Your grandfather didn't disappear. He joined them. A cold feeling spread through my chest. What do you mean? They called him, like they called to me, like they're calling to you now. He squeezed my hand tightly. But it skips sometimes. It might not be you they want. I thought of Noah, of his fascination with the lake, and felt a chill. Noah, my father whispered, as if reading my thoughts. They're calling to Noah now. When I got back to the station, Dr. Phillips was waiting with two men in dark suits. They had taken Victoria's recordings and were installing new equipment all around the North Basin. This is now a government-monitored site, Phillips informed me coldly. We'll need your full cooperation, Ranger Reynolds. On whose authority? I demanded. He handed me a letter with a government seal I didn't recognize. What exactly are you looking for? I asked. Phillips smiled thinly. Just following up on reports of water quality issues. Nothing for you to worry about. But as they left, I overheard one of the men mention Operation Deep Scan, the exact words written on a file my grandfather had kept locked in his desk. A file I'd found as a child, but never been able to open. That night, I broke into my father's old storage locker and found the file buried in a box of family papers. Inside were documents from 1928 detailing a government study of unidentified aquatic life forms in Lake Champlain. The final page was a blurry photograph of something being pulled from the lake. Something with a long neck, reptilian head, and eyes that looked disturbingly intelligent. Whatever was in our lake, the government had known about it for nearly 50 years. And now they were back. I woke to the sound of thunder, except there wasn't supposed to be any storm. My weather app showed clear skies for the entire region, but when I looked out the window, dark clouds hung over the lake, like a lid on a pot. Nowhere else, just the lake. That's not normal, I muttered, grabbing my radio. All channels were buzzing with confused boaters. The storm had appeared out of nowhere, trapping at least 6 tourist boats in the northern basin. Dad? Noah stood in the doorway, rubbing sleep from his eyes. What's happening? Stay here, I told him, grabbing my jacket. I need to help some people. Victoria met me at the dock, rain plastering her hair to her face. I've never seen a storm form this fast, she shouted over the wind. It's like it's concentrated just over the water. We took the biggest rescue boat, fighting waves that shouldn't have been possible on a lake this size. Lightning cracked directly overhead, striking the water in patterns that seemed almost deliberate. Through the rain, we could see the stranded boats. Some had clustered together, while others were trying to make it to shore. We headed for a small fishing boat that was drifting dangerously close to the deep channel. We'll tow you in, I shouted to the terrified family inside. Victoria threw them a line while I maneuvered our boat alongside theirs. That's when I felt it, a massive shape moving beneath us. Our boat lurched upward as if pushed from below, then flipped completely over. The cold water hit me like a shock. I broke the surface, gasping, and saw Victoria helping the family into one of the other rescue boats that had arrived. Our boat was capsized, its hull showing a large dent, as if something had punched it from below. Marcus! Victoria screamed, pointing behind me. I turned just in time to see it, a long serpentine neck rising from the water about 30 feet away. It rose higher and higher, at least 10 feet out of the water. The head was reptilian but wrong somehow, like a lizard but with vertical pupils like a cat. Instead of scales, it had interlocking plates that shimmered with a blue-green glow. For one heart-stopping moment, its eyes met mine. There was intelligence there, cold, ancient awareness that made me feel like a bug under a microscope. Then it sank back beneath the waves, and the storm began to calm almost immediately. By the time we all made it back to shore, the skies were clearing. Nobody was badly hurt, but everyone had seen something. The The stories spread through town like wildfire. Different details, but always the same basic shape. Long neck, intelligent eyes, not a fish, not a snake, not anything people recognized. It wasn't aggressive, Victoria said as we dried off at the station. It could have attacked any of those boats, but it didn't. It just looked at us. Before I could answer, my phone rang. It was Noah. Dad, I found something. I was looking through Grandpa's old stuff in the attic and found this journal from the 1930s. It talks about Operation Deep Scan. Stay there, I told him. I'm coming home. The journal belonged to my grandfather. Most entries were routine notes about lake patrols. But starting in May 1937, he began writing about strange sightings and a government team that arrived to study them. They claim to be studying water quality, he wrote, but their equipment is military. They're searching for something specific. The final entry was dated August 15th, 1938, the day before he disappeared. I've established contact. They respond to specific sounds. They're intelligent, maybe more than us. The government team wants to capture one for study. I can't let that happen. I've warned them about the cave system, but they won't listen. Tomorrow I'll try one last time to communicate directly. He knew, I said, looking up at Noah. He knew what they were. Noah nodded excitedly. And there's more. Look at this map. Tucked inside the journal was a hand-drawn map of underwater cave systems, not shown on any official charts. One cave was marked with the same spiral symbol we'd seen in the video. We need to show this to Victoria and John, I said. But before we could leave, Dr. Phillips and his men arrived at our door. We need to speak with you, Ranger Reynolds. Alone. His eyes flicked to Noah. Government business. I sent Noah to his room, but I knew he'd be listening. We've analyzed the recordings, Phillips said once we were in my office. They're not animal sounds. I know. He looked surprised. You know what they are? Some kind of language? That's what you're really here for, isn't it? Not water quality. Phillips studied me for a long moment. I represent a research division that studies evolutionary divergent species in isolated environments. Lake Champlain has been on our radar since the 1920s. Evolutionary divergent species. You mean CHAMP. We don't use that name, he said stiffly. But yes, the creatures in this lake appear to be a relict population of sauropterygians that evolved. In isolation. In English, please, he sighed. Imagine plesiosaurs that didn't die out but instead adapted to freshwater and continued evolving for 65 million years. Higher intelligence, advanced communication, possibly even tool use. It sounded crazy, but after what I'd seen, I couldn't dismiss it. What do you want from them? I asked. Study. Perhaps specimen collection. You mean capture or kill? His face hardened. This is a scientific opportunity without precedent. Your cooperation would be appreciated, but is not required. After he left, I called Victoria and John to meet us at the station. We spent hours reviewing my grandfather's journal and map, comparing it with Victoria's recordings and the recent sightings. The Abenaki have stories about communicating with the water beings, John said, through specific sounds and rhythms, like a ritual language. Victoria played her recordings again. These patterns repeat at mathematical intervals, prime numbers specifically. That suggests intelligence. My grandfather wrote that they responded to specific sounds, I said. If we could reproduce those, we might be able to communicate. With them, Victoria finished. We worked through the night using Victoria's equipment to create tones that match the patterns in the recordings. John helped identify sounds described in tribal legends. We were so absorbed in our work that none of us noticed Noah had slipped out until much later. He left a note, Victoria said, handing me a piece of paper. He went fishing with Emmett and Lisa. At night, my stomach dropped. Where? Miller's Cove, the exact spot where the deep channel came closest to shore. We raced to the lake, calling Noah's name. We found the kids' empty boat drifting near the center of the cove. No sign of struggle, just a strange, slick residue along the sides of the boat. "Noah!" I shouted until my voice gave out. "Noah!" Only the gentle lapping of waves answered. For 3 days we searched. Police dragged the lake. Volunteers combed the shoreline. Nothing. Dr. Phillips brought in military-grade sonar and thermal imaging equipment. The images they captured confirmed what Victoria and I had suspected. There were multiple creatures in the lake. A whole family unit, with the largest, dubbed Ancient One by John, measuring over 40 feet from nose to tail. But more disturbing was what the thermal imaging showed beneath the creature's habitat, a massive pocket of gas trapped under the lake bed. If disturbed, it could release enough toxic gas to poison the entire lake system. The creatures seemed to be living right above this gas pocket, Victoria noted, almost like they're guarding it. When we analyzed water samples from near the creature's habitat, we found something astonishing. Advanced bacteria that could break down modern pollutants, keeping that part of the lake remarkably clean. "They're engineers," Victoria whispered. "They're actively managing their environment." On the 4th day, Phillips arrived with a new team, military personnel with specialized equipment. I overheard them discussing plans to extract a juvenile specimen. "They're going after the young ones," I told Victoria and John, "and they're bringing sonic weapons to disorient the adults." "Those vibrations could rupture the gas pocket," Victoria warned, but Phillips wouldn't listen. "This is now a military operation," he informed me. "Stay out of the way." That night, desperate and out of options, we took Victoria's boat to the center of the lake. We brought the sound equipment we'd been working on, tones and patterns based on my grandfather's notes and John's tribal knowledge. "This is crazy," Victoria said as we lowered the speakers into the water. "What if they're hostile?" "They took my son," I said, voice breaking. "They took Noah. I have to try." John began a low, rhythmic chant as we played the sounds through the underwater speakers. For an hour, nothing happened. Then the water around our boat began to glow with that familiar blue-green light. The surface bubbled as if boiling, and I felt something massive rising from below. A head broke the surface just yards from our boat. The same creature I'd seen during the storm. Its eyes fixed on me, and suddenly my mind was filled with images that weren't my own. A cave with an air pocket. Noah, alive, sitting on a stone ledge. Other humans there too, some recent, some who had been there for decades. My grandfather. "He's alive," I gasped. "Noah's alive." "Noah is alive," I repeated, my voice shaking. "I saw him. In my mind, I saw him." Victoria and John stared at me. "What do you mean you saw him?" Victoria asked. The creature showed me, like pictures in my head. "Noah's in an underwater cave with an air pocket." I turned to John. "My grandfather is there too. He's alive." John nodded slowly. "The underwater people can share thoughts. The legends say they could put pictures in your mind." "We need to find this cave," Victoria said, already checking the maps. Before we could make a plan, the lake erupted around us. 4 more heads rose from the water surrounding our boat, smaller than the first one, but just as strange. Long necks, intelligent eyes, plates instead of scales. Again, my mind filled with images, military boats, sound weapons, pain, the underwater caves breaking apart. "They're showing me what Phillips is planning," I said. "The sonic weapons will hurt them and rupture the gas pocket." More images flowed into my mind. The lake bed cracking, bubbles of poison gas rising to the surface, fish dying by the thousands, then people. If that gas releases, it'll kill everything in and around the lake, I realized. That's why they've been guarding it all these years. They're protecting us. The creatures sank beneath the surface, leaving us alone in the glowing water. "We have to stop Phillips," Victoria said. "First, we have to find Noah." Using my grandfather's map and the images the creature had shared, we located where the underwater cave system should be. By dawn, We were ready to dive. "I'm going alone," I told Victoria and John as I checked my scuba gear. "That's suicide," Victoria argued. "You need backup." "Someone needs to stop Phillips," I said. "If I don't come back with Noah in 3 hours, go to the press with everything we know." I dove into the cold, dark water, following the narrow beam of my flashlight. At 80 feet, I found the cave entrance, just like in the video, a perfect arch with carvings around it. Inside, the tunnel sloped upward. My air supply was getting low when I finally broke the surface in a large air pocket. The cave was dimly lit by the same blue-green glow that seemed to come from the creatures themselves. Dad. Noah sat on a stone ledge, looking scared but unhurt. Next to him was an old man with a wild white beard, impossibly old. "Grandfather," I whispered. The old man squinted at me. "Marcus, is that you?" I pulled myself out of the water. "Noah, are you okay?" He nodded. "They brought me here. They can talk without talking, show you things in your head." "I know." I turned to my grandfather. "You've been here since 1938? He nodded slowly. "Time works differently down here. They needed a translator, someone to help them understand humans." He gestured around. "There have been others. Some stay a while, then go back. Some choose to stay." "Why Noah? Why our family?" "Something in our minds is compatible with theirs, makes communication easier." A splash behind me made me turn. One of the creatures had surfaced in the cave pool, a smaller one, maybe 20 feet long. It watched us with those intelligent eyes. "They're afraid," my grandfather said. "Your government friends are up there right now, getting ready to use weapons that will destroy everything." "I need to get Noah out of here," I said. The creature made a soft trilling sound, and suddenly my mind was full of images again. Underwater tunnels leading to safety, but also Phillips' boats positioned above, ready to capture anything that emerged. "We're trapped," I realized. Noah touched my arm. "Dad, I think I can help. They've been teaching me how to talk to them." While Noah and my grandfather communicated with the creature, I checked my watch. 2 hours had passed. Victoria and John would be getting ready to go public. But would it be enough to stop Phillips? Suddenly the cave shook. Dust and small rocks fell from the ceiling. "They've started," my grandfather said grimly. "The sonic weapons." The creature in the pool thrashed in obvious pain. Through our mental connection, I felt its agony as the sound waves tore through the water. Noah closed his eyes, concentrating. "There's another way out," he said after a moment, "but it's dangerous. Through a tunnel that goes under the gas pocket." "Show me," I said. The creature led us through a labyrinth of underwater passages. With each blast from above, more debris fell. Cracks were forming in the lake bed. Soon the gas would start to escape. We surfaced in a different cave, this one directly beneath the gas pocket. The rock ceiling bubbled and hissed, the toxic gas just waiting to break through. "We need to seal it," I said, "before it all leaks out." My grandfather pointed to a narrow tunnel. "That leads to the surface. Get Noah out while there's still time." "What about you?" I asked. He smiled sadly. "I made my choice long ago. I belong here now." Before I could argue, the Ancient One, the largest creature, surfaced in the cave pool. It was massive, at least 40 feet long, with eyes that looked as old as the lake itself. My mind filled with a plan. If we could cause a controlled explosion, we could seal the gas pocket before it ruptured completely. But someone would need to place explosive charges exactly right. "I'll do it," I said. Noah grabbed my arm. "Dad, no!" "Get to the surface," I told him. "Victoria and John will be looking for you. Tell them what happened." "I won't leave you." The cave shook again, harder this time. A large crack formed in the ceiling, releasing a hiss of toxic gas. "Go!" I shouted, pushing him toward the exit tunnel. Through tears, Noah finally nodded and disappeared into the tunnel. My grandfather handed me the charges, old mining explosives he'd been saving just in case. Together, we placed them around the cave while the Ancient One watched. It's been waiting for this moment, my grandfather said, for someone to make. This sacrifice, will it work? He shrugged. Maybe, if the blast seals the pocket instead of releasing it all at once. Another sonic blast from above. More cracks appeared. No more time, I said. My grandfather hugged me quickly. Tell your father. I'm sorry I never came back. I set the timer for 3 minutes, enough time for my grandfather to get to safety, but not enough for the gas pocket to fully rupture. As I worked, my mind filled with new images from the Ancient One. My family through generations, watching the lake, my grandfather's arrival, my own childhood visits, Noah's future. You've been watching us all along, I realized. The Ancient One blinked slowly in acknowledgement. The timer was set. My grandfather retreated to a side tunnel where the other creatures waited. I stood alone with the Ancient One as the seconds ticked away. You should go, I told it. This whole cave is going to collapse. Instead, it moved closer, its massive body sliding into the shallow water near me. Through our mental connection, I understood it wasn't leaving. The explosive charges beeped their final warning. I closed my eyes, thinking of Noah, of Victoria, of the lake I'd spent my life protecting. Then the Ancient One's body wrapped around me, creating a protective cocoon. I felt a strange, tingling sensation as its bioelectric field enveloped me. The world exploded. I should have died instantly. Instead, I woke in darkness, my body burning with pain, but somehow intact. The Ancient One's bioelectric field had created a bubble of protection around me during the explosion. I was underwater, but breathing, actually breathing water through slits that had formed in my neck. My skin tingled with sensitivity, detecting electrical fields in the water around me. The creatures found me and guided me to a new cave system far from the sealed gas pocket. Days passed as my body continued to change, my lungs adapting to process water and air, my eyes developing membranes that let me see clearly underwater. On the surface, the world moved on. Phillips and his team were discredited when journalists revealed their unauthorized military operation had nearly caused an environmental disaster. The story was that unexpected seismic activity had collapsed part of the lake bed, forcing them to retreat. Noah was found clinging to debris near the shore, telling a confused story about underwater caves that most people dismissed as trauma. Only Victoria and John believed him. Victoria became the new head ranger, while John started a conservation program focused on preserving Lake Champlain's unique ecosystem. For 5 months, I stayed below, learning to live with my new abilities and limitations. I could survive on land for a few hours at a time, but needed to return to the water daily. The creatures, which I now understood were a highly evolved, intelligent species with their own complex society, accepted me as a bridge between worlds. Once a week I would meet Victoria and Noah at a secluded cove. Victoria helped monitor my physical changes, while Noah and I developed our shared ability to communicate with the creatures. "Are you ever coming home?" Noah asked during one visit. "I am home," I told him. "But so are you. We're the Watchers. Now both of us." Noah nodded, understanding what I meant. The creatures had formed a connection with him too, though not as profound as mine. He could sense their presence, receive their simple messages. On his 16th birthday, I gave Noah my grandfather's journal. "Your turn to keep the records," I said. "Will they ever show themselves to everyone?" he asked. "Maybe someday, when humans are ready." That night, as Noah left the shore, I dove deep into the lake with the Ancient One beside me. Through our mental connection, I showed it images of my son growing up, carrying on our family's legacy as guardians of the lake. In return, it showed me the underwater civilization they had built over thousands of years, structures, tools, art, and young ones being taught the history of their people. And something else too, images of other humans who had joined them over centuries, some temporarily. some permanently. I wasn't the first to make this choice. And as I watched Noah walking along the shoreline, head tilted as if listening to voices under the water, I knew I wouldn't be the last. Some secrets, I realized, are meant to stay beneath the surface, watched over by those who understand their true power. The depths would keep their deceptions, and we would keep our promise. The first time I heard the water whisper my name, I thought I was losing my mind. 3 years after Maria's death, grief plays tricks on you. But in the Everglades, sometimes what sounds like madness is the only thing that makes sense. My name is Leroy Jackson. I've been a ranger here for 30 years, following in my daddy's footsteps, who followed his daddy before him. The marsh is in my blood. Every cypress knee and sawgrass blade feels like family. This morning started like any other. I pushed my airboat out just before dawn, when mist hangs so thick over the water you can scoop it with your hands. The engines roar, scared up a flock of white ibis, their wings cutting through fog like ghosts disappearing into nothing. I was checking water levels in Sector 7. We'd had heavy rain for weeks, but somehow the water kept dropping. Made no sense. Nature follows rules, even when those rules aren't in science books. My radio crackled. "Leroy, you out near Alligator Alley?" It was Samson from dispatch. "Yeah, what's up?" "Got another report. Couple tourists say a gator tried to flip their boat. Third one this week." I frowned. Gators don't do that unless provoked. And these weren't rookie tourists. Something was making the normally lazy reptiles aggressive. "I'll check it out," I promised, turning my boat toward the coordinates. The channel narrowed as I went deeper, into the backcountry. Places like this, you're seeing what dinosaurs saw, primordial, ancient. The kind of quiet that feels like the world holding its breath. That's when I noticed something odd. Tracks on a small shell island. Now footprints here can appear and vanish in hours with the changing water, but these weren't human tracks. They were too big, with a strange pattern I'd never seen before. As I stepped onto the island, the hair on my arms stood up. This was an old Calusa shell mound, undisturbed for centuries, but carved into an old cypress stump were fresh symbols. Curved lines that reminded me of water flowing, but with sharp angles that felt wrong. "Hey, Jackson!" a voice called out. I turned to see Miguel, one of the Miccosukee guides who took tourists through the safe channels. His boat approached slowly, which wasn't like him. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his eyes darting around nervously. "What are you talking about? I patrol this sector every week." "Not anymore. None of our people will guide through these channels. Now." "Why not?" He lowered his voice. "Listen at night. You'll hear it calling. It's not an animal, Leroy." Before I could ask more, he revved his engine and disappeared around the bend. The Miccosukee had navigated these waters for generations. If they were avoiding places, there was a reason. That night, I stayed at my floating station instead of heading back to the mainland. Around midnight, I heard it, a low, rumbling sound that seemed to come from beneath the water rather than above it. Not a gator, not a bullfrog, not anything I'd heard in 53 years of living in these swamps. I grabbed my recorder and stepped outside. The sound came again, a deep guttural vibration that I felt in my chest more than heard with my ears. I clicked on my flashlight and scanned the dark water. For just a second, I swear I saw something move against the current, something huge and serpentine, sliding beneath the surface like a living shadow. I told myself it was lack of sleep, told myself it was grief making me see things. But deep down, I knew better. The Everglades were changing, the water was dropping, and something very old was waking up. Grandmother Isabel, the Miccosukee elder who'd been my guide to the old ways since I was a boy, had always warned me, when the water goes down, the first ones rise. I was beginning to think she wasn't speaking in metaphors. My floating ranger station isn't much, but it's home. One room filled with maps, water testing equipment and family photos. Maria smiles at me from every wall. My wife, gone 3 years. Now they called it an accident. Said she drowned in a channel she'd navigated 100 times. I never believed it. I was making coffee when my radio buzzed. Frank from headquarters. Jackson, heads up. We've got a scientist coming your way. Some hotshot hydrologist from the university. I sighed. Another one? What's this one want? Water table's acting weird. You've reported it yourself. She's going to help figure out why. Scientists come and go. They take samples, write papers, and never really understand the glades. They don't listen to the water. An hour later, a sleek airboat pulled up. The woman who stepped onto my dock wore khaki pants and a button-up shirt that looked too new. Her red hair was tied back in a tight ponytail. "Dr. Diana Taylor," she said, extending her hand. "University of Florida Hydrology." "Department, Leroy Jackson," I replied, shaking it. "Coffee?" She looked around my cluttered station and tried not to wrinkle her nose. "Thanks, but I've brought my own supplies. I understand you've been tracking the water recession?" I nodded, pulling out my journals. 30 years of observations. Water's dropping in places it shouldn't, even with all the rain. She flipped through my handwritten notes with interest, pausing at certain pages. "You've included folk stories in your scientific observations." Around here, the old stories often explain what science can't. She raised an eyebrow but said nothing. The radio crackled again. This time, it was Tommy at the visitor center. "Leroy, someone here to see you, says she's your daughter." My coffee mug froze halfway to my mouth. Ayana hadn't spoken to me in years, not since she left for college, calling my beliefs superstitious nonsense. "Send her out," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. 20 minutes later, another boat arrived. Ayana stepped out, looking so much like her mother it made my chest hurt. She wore a government badge on her belt. "Dad," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Didn't expect to see you back in the swamp," I said. "It's work. I'm with the EPA now. We're investigating industrial runoff in the watershed." She gestured to Dr. Taylor. "You must be the hydrologist they sent." Diana nodded. "You two know each other?" "He's my father," Ayana said flatly. The awkward silence was broken by the arrival of a fourth boat. Grandmother Isabel, her face weathered, its old cypress bark, pulled up in her small wooden skiff. At 83, she still navigated the channels better than rangers half her age. "Leroy," she called, "we need to talk." Her eyes widened, seeing Ayana. "The daughter returns. The signs align." Ayana rolled her eyes. "Please, not the mystical talk again." "You mock what you don't understand," Grandmother Isabel said. "Your father knows. He feels it too." "Feels what?" Dr. Taylor asked. Grandmother Isabel fixed her with a stare. "When water goes down, the first ones rise. It's happening again. The 83-year cycle." "What cycle?" Dr. Taylor looked confused. Explained. "Every 83 years, water patterns change. Wildlife acts strange. Things appear." "What things?" Ayana asked, her scientific skepticism battling childhood memories. "Last time was 1909, Grandmother Isabel said. My grandmother saw it rise, took 12 lives before returning to sleep." Dr. Taylor was already shaking her head. "I'm sure there's a perfectly rational explanation for the water anomalies." "Is there a rational explanation for this?" I asked, pulling out water samples I'd collected yesterday. "This water destroyed my testing equipment. Some kind of organic compound science can't identify. And this," I added, showing them photos of the massive underwater structure I'd found. Cypress trees and human objects arranged in what looked unmistakably like a nest. Dr. Taylor took the samples, frowning. "I'll analyze these properly." Ayana looked troubled. "Dad, the EPA's finding strange pollution patterns too. Things that should kill everything in the water, but somehow the ecosystem's adapting." Grandmother Isabel nodded knowingly. "It protects what belongs to it. The water never sleeps, even when its master does." That night, as the four of us sat on my station's small deck, the strange sounds came again, louder this time. A deep, vibrating call that seemed to make the very water tremble. "What is that?" Dr. Taylor whispered, scientific certainty shaken. "That," I said, "is what I've been trying to tell you. Something's waking up in the glades, and I think it's hungry." The next morning, Dr. Taylor was already up at dawn, setting up her equipment on my dock. I watched her dip sensors into the water and frown at the readings. "This makes no sense," she muttered. "The chemical composition is like nothing I've seen before." I handed her a cup of coffee. "Welcome to my world. Your equipment didn't malfunction," she admitted. "Something in this water is breaking down the sensors. It's like it's alive somehow." Ayana joined us, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "I need to take samples further south, near the industrial canals." "I'll take you," I said, trying to hide my eagerness to spend time with my daughter. As we loaded gear onto my airboat, Grandmother Isabel appeared silently in her skiff, laying a small cloth bundle on my seat. "Protection," she said simply. Inside was a small pouch of herbs and a carved wooden charm. Ayana rolled her eyes, but I tucked it into my pocket. We spent the morning collecting water samples. Everything seemed normal until we reached a remote channel I rarely visited. My GPS started glitching, the screen showing us in places we couldn't possibly be. "Dad, look at this," Ayana said suddenly, pointing to her map. "This channel isn't even on the latest survey. It's like it just appeared." The water here was darker, almost black. As we drifted slowly, I noticed the silence. No birds calling, no insects buzzing. Nothing. "Stop the boat," Ayana whispered. "Something's wrong." The water around us began to bubble, small at first, then spreading across the surface like boiling soup. The smell hit us, ancient, musty air escaping from somewhere deep below. "What is that?" Ayana gasped, her science training failing to explain what we were seeing. "Limestone caves under us," I said. "Some are millions of years old, with air pockets sealed inside. Something's breaking them open." The bubbling stopped as suddenly as it began. In the new silence, we heard splashing, dozens of animals swimming, rapidly away from the area we were heading toward. "Animals don't run for no reason," I said, starting the engine again. "Let's follow them." "No," Ayana said, her face pale. "Let's go in the other direction, see what they're running from." It took us 30 minutes to reach the spot. What we found made my blood run cold. A perfect circle of water, maybe 50 feet, across, spinning slowly like a giant whirlpool. But nothing was draining, just turning as if stirred by an invisible finger. I cut the engine and we drifted closer. The water was clear enough that we could see down about 20 feet, where the sunlight faded to darkness. As we watched, something moved in that darkness. Something huge. "Dad," Ayana whispered, grabbing my arm. "Tell me that's an alligator." I shook my head. Too big. A flash of scales reflected sunlight, not the dull armor of a gator, but something iridescent, with patterns that seemed to glow from within. Dr. Taylor's voice crackled over the radio. "Leroy! Ayana! Get back here now!" We sped back to find Dr. Taylor staring at her laptop, her face drained of color. "I put underwater cameras near those shell mounds," she said. "Look what they captured." The footage showed murky water, then a sudden movement. Something massive passed by the camera. Just a section of what looked like scaled hide, but with glowing blue patterns that pulsed like heartbeats. The camera shook violently before going dark. "That section of hide was at least 15 feet across," Dr. Taylor said. "Whatever it is, it's enormous." That afternoon, tourists reported seeing what they described as a dinosaur in the water. Rangers dismissed it as an alligator sighting. Gators can look prehistoric to city folks. But I knew better. As night fell, I took out special equipment. A recorder that captures infrasound, vibrations too low for human ears. For hours, nothing happened, Then, around midnight, the readings spiked off the charts. "What's causing that?" Ayana asked, her skepticism wavering. "Nothing we know of makes sounds that big," I admitted. Grandmother Isabel appeared in the doorway. "I've translated the symbols you found," she said. "They're a warning. The sleeping one drinks the land when stars align." Dr. Taylor opened her laptop. "I've been running simulations on the water table. Something's draining billions of gallons from the aquifer, but it's not flowing anywhere. It's like the water is just disappearing." The radio crackled urgently. "All rangers, we've got an emergency at Sector 9. Some kind of sinkhole just opened up. It's huge." We rushed to the site. The sinkhole was perfectly circular, at least 100 feet across. Water poured into it like a bathtub drain. Along the inside edge, carved into the limestone, were symbols matching those I'd found on the shell mound. Ayana leaned over to touch one of the carvings. "These look fresh, but that's impossible. This rock was underground until an hour ago. Unless," Dr. Taylor said slowly, "something carved them from below." As we stared into the massive hole, I felt certain of one thing. Whatever was down there, it was waking up, and it was changing the Everglades to welcome its return. The next 3 days brought the worst drought the Everglades had seen in decades. Water levels dropped so low that ancient cypress stumps, normally hidden underwater, now stood exposed like bony fingers reaching for the sky. The weather made no sense. Rain fell heavily all around us, but it was like the glades themselves were drinking the water before it could pool. "We've got a problem," Dr. Taylor announced, spreading satellite maps across my table. "Look at these temperature readings." The images showed a cold blue spot deep beneath the surface, spreading like veins through the underwater cave systems. "Something's cooling the aquifer," she explained. "And look here." She pointed to readings from underwater probes. "I found an unmapped tunnel system. It seems to connect directly to the ocean trench about 40 miles offshore." "How deep?" I asked. "Too deep for standard equipment. My probe reached 300 feet before finding something unusual." She pulled up video footage on her laptop. The murky darkness gave way to what looked like a massive chamber with perfectly smooth walls, too regular to be natural. "Is that man-made?" Ayana asked, leaning closer. "No human has been down there," Grandmother Isabel said from the doorway. She'd become a regular visitor now. "Those are the sleeping chambers, built before people walked these lands." Dr. Taylor, to her credit, no longer dismissed the old woman's words. Science was failing to explain what was happening. "I've been having dreams," Ayana confessed quietly, "about an underwater city. Strange buildings where creatures, half human, half reptile, worship a giant snake." Grandmother Isabel nodded. "The dreams come when it's waking. It reaches out, with its mind first." That afternoon, I took my boat out to check on wildlife reports. What I found chilled me more than anything yet. 7 full-grown alligators, each over 12 feet long, arranged in a perfect spiral pattern on a sandbar. All dead, their bodies sliced open with surgical precision. I radioed Ranger Control for a helicopter flyover. From the air, the pattern was unmistakable. A massive spiral that could only be seen properly from above, like it was meant to be viewed from the sky. "Who could do this?" the pilot asked, his voice shaking. "Not who," I replied. "What?" When I returned to the station, Dr. Taylor was frantically checking weather data. "There's a hurricane forming," she said. "Category 3, coming directly for us." "It's hurricane season," I replied. "Not unusual. What's unusual is its path. Hurricanes don't move like this. It's changed course 3 times, always redirecting straight toward the Everglades. The meteorologists can't explain it." I found Grandmother Isabel at the dock, staring at the darkening sky. "You've figured it out, haven't you?" she asked without looking at me. I nodded. "The symbols, the 83-year cycle. It matches. The celestial alignment happening tomorrow night. The stars will align directly over the deepest part of the glades," she confirmed. When they do, the sleeping one will fully awaken. That night, as storm clouds gathered on the horizon, I took my boat out alone. I needed to see for myself. I navigated to the spot where we'd seen the whirlpool days earlier. The water there was now completely gone, revealing a circular shaft descending into darkness. I tied off my boat nearby and approached carefully on foot. The ground rumbled beneath me. As I shined my flashlight down the shaft, something moved in the darkness. Below, something massive. Suddenly my boat rose from the water, lifted from beneath by an unseen force. It hung suspended for a moment before crashing down, splintering into pieces. I ran, heart pounding, as the ground cracked behind me. I barely made it to solid land before the entire area collapsed into the widening hole. When I made it back to the station, soaked and trembling, Dr. Taylor was monitoring equipment that was going haywire. Massive water displacement detected moving inland from the ocean trench, she reported. It's like an underwater tsunami, following the cave systems directly toward us. Where's Ayana? I asked, suddenly realizing she wasn't there. She went to check on equipment we left at the shell mound, Dr. Taylor said. She should have been back hours ago. I tried Ayana's radio, nothing but static. As I prepared to go search for her, Grandmother Isabel grabbed my arm with surprising strength. The sacrifice has been taken, she whispered. They've waited generations for this moment. What sacrifice? Who's taken her? I demanded. Those who worship the old ways. They believe the sleeping one requires blood to complete its awakening. As if punctuating her words, lightning split the sky and thunder rolled across the water. The hurricane was approaching faster than any storm should move, defying all natural laws. I grabbed my emergency gear and headed for the door. Where's this ritual happening? The center place, Grandmother Isabel said, where 3 channels meet beneath the cypress dome. I knew the spot, an ancient meeting ground, sacred to the Calusa, who lived here thousands of years before. Dr. Taylor grabbed her equipment bag. I'm coming with you. Outside, the wind was picking up, bending palm trees like blades of grass. The water churned with unnatural currents, flowing in impossible directions, all moving toward the center of the glades. As we pushed off in her boat, I felt something I'd never experienced before. True fear of the waters I'd known all my life. Whatever was coming wasn't just a storm. It was Judgment Day for the Everglades. And my daughter was caught in the middle of it. The storm hit with unnatural fury as Dr. Taylor and I raced through channels that kept changing direction. Wind-whipped rain stung my face like needles, but the scariest thing was the water. It glowed with faint blue patterns, the same ones we'd seen on the creature. Look, Dr. Taylor shouted over the howling wind, pointing ahead. In the distance, torches flickered around the ancient cypress dome. As we drew closer, I could make out figures in dark robes, maybe 20 people standing in a circle. In the center was a stone altar that shouldn't have been there. This land had been underwater for decades until now. There she is. I spotted Ayana tied to the altar, struggling against her bonds. I cut the engine and we drifted behind a clump of mangroves, close enough to see but hidden from view. The robed figures were chanting in a language I'd never heard, raising their arms toward the sky where, despite the hurricane, a perfect circle of clear night sky had opened directly above them. Stars shone through in a specific pattern. The alignment, Dr. Taylor whispered, just as predicted. The water around the cypress dome was dropping rapidly, creating a dry basin. The ground began to tremble, and from the center of the circle, the earth split open. Water bubbled up. Not normal water, but something thick and dark that glowed with those same blue patterns. We need to get her now while they're distracted, I said, reaching for my knife. But before we could move, something massive erupted from the opening. I've lived my whole life in the Everglades. I've seen 16-foot alligators and pythons that could swallow a deer, but nothing prepared me for what rose from that hole. It came in segments. First a head that looked like an ancient crocodile, but with feathered crests where ears should be. Then a neck that kept coming and coming, thick as a car and covered in scales, that shifted colors like oil on water. Its eyes were huge, glowing the same blue as the patterns on its body, with vertical pupils that seemed to take in everything. My God, Dr. Taylor breathed. It's like a titanoboa mixed with the horned serpent of the old stories, I finished. The cult members fell to their knees. Their leader approached Ayana with a stone knife raised high. I didn't think. I just moved. Splashing through knee-deep water, I ran toward my daughter, shouting to distract them. "Stop! I'm the one you want!" The cult leader turned, knife still raised. "The Guardian returns! Even better!" The massive serpent's head swiveled toward me, those ancient eyes fixing on mine. And then the strangest thing happened. I heard a voice. In my head, ancient and deep as the bedrock beneath the glades. "Guardian, you have kept watch." The cult members looked shocked. Apparently they heard it too. "Let my daughter go," I said, both out loud and in my mind. The creature's gaze shifted to Ayana. "She carries your blood, the blood of guardians." The cult leader stepped forward. "Great One, we have prepared the sacrifice as foretold." "Silence," the voice boomed in all our heads. "You know nothing of the old ways." With lightning speed, the serpent struck, swallowing the cult leader whole. The other robed figures scattered in terror, disappearing into the storm. Dr. Taylor had reached Ayana and was cutting her free. The three of us stood together, facing the massive creature as the hurricane swirled around us, somehow leaving the center circle untouched. "What do you want?" I asked it. Images flooded my mind. Prehistoric Florida, the land as it was millions of years ago. I saw the creature and others like it, guardians of an underground aquifer system that kept salt water from contaminating the fresh water that gave life to the land. "We sleep, we purge, we protect," the voice explained. "The cycle must continue." More images came. Industrial waste, chemicals, pollution seeping into the aquifer, poisoning everything. The creature was a protector, rising every 83 years to clean the waters before returning to hibernation. "It's a purification system," Dr. Taylor said in awe, somehow sharing the vision. "It's been protecting the aquifer for millions of years. The waters are too corrupted this time," the creature communicated. "The Guardian must join with me to complete the cleansing." I understood then what it wanted. A sacrifice, but not of death, of joining. My knowledge of the waters, my lifetime of protection, somehow made me compatible. "Dad, no." Ayana grabbed my arm. "It's okay," I told her, suddenly calm. "This is why. Your mother died in those waters. She was a warning, a harbinger. This is what I was born to do." The hurricane's eye was directly above us now, creating perfect stillness. The stars aligned in their ancient pattern, shining down on the sacred space. "Wait!" Dr. Taylor shouted. She pulled out her satellite phone. "I can redirect the industrial. Drainage. Give me 1 hour." The creature seemed to consider this, its massive head swaying gently. 1 hour, it communicated. Dr. Taylor made frantic calls, using her government connections to trigger emergency protocols at the nearby industrial plants. Floodgates were closed, pumps reversed, pollution diverted from the critical waterways. She worked. I approached the creature slowly. "If she succeeds, will you spare the joining?" "The waters must be cleansed, Guardian. But there are many ways to join." It lowered its massive head, bringing one glowing eye level with mine. Slowly, it extended a feathered appendage from beside its jaw, touching my forehead gently. Pain shot through me like lightning. I felt the creature's consciousness merge with mine for a brief moment, ancient, powerful, but ultimately concerned only with balance and protection, just as I was. When it withdrew, I fell to my knees. Ayana rushed to my side. "Dad, are you okay?" I couldn't speak at first. My mind was filled with knowledge of underground rivers, hidden caves, water sources I'd never known existed. I could feel the water everywhere, like extensions of my own body. Dr. Taylor returned, breathless. "It's done. The emergency protocols are activated. The pollutants are being contained." The creature raised its massive head toward the sky, as if testing the air. Then it looked at me one last time. "Guardian, you will watch. When the waters speak, you will listen." With that, it began to descend back into the earth, its enormous body sliding down into the hole it had emerged from. As the last of it disappeared, the ground sealed itself as if it had never opened. Immediately, the hurricane dissipated like someone had flipped a switch. The water levels began to rise again, covering the dried land. The unnatural glow faded. From the water returning to normal, I stood up shakily, feeling forever changed. When I reached up to wipe rain from my face, Ayana gasped, "Dad, your hair!" Later, looking in a mirror, I saw that my hair had turned completely white. But that wasn't the only change. I could sense water, feel its currents, its depth, its purity, without seeing it. The government investigation called it a mass hallucination caused by gas released during the storm. They documented the mysterious drought and equally mysterious hurricane dissipation, but found no evidence of abnormal aquatic life. The cult members were arrested for kidnapping, telling wild stories that nobody believed. Nobody except us. Ayana didn't return to her EPA job. Instead, she stayed in the Everglades, working with me to document and protect the ancient sites. Dr. Taylor became a regular visitor, her scientific papers on Everglades hydrology carefully avoiding mention of what we'd really seen. 15 years. Later, as I lay dying in my bed during another drought season, I called my granddaughter, Ayana's child, to my side. "Listen to the water," I whispered to her. "Watch for the signs. It will rise again in 68 years. She nodded solemnly, taking the weather journal I'd kept all these years. As she took it, I felt a weight lift from me. The guardianship would continue. Outside, thunder rolled across. A cloudless sky, the water never sleeps, and neither do its guardians. The day I saw the sky turn blood red over Mount Shasta was the day everything changed. Some might say that's when the horror began. But truth is, the horror had been building for months. I just hadn't wanted to see it. My name is Robert Thompson, but nobody calls me that except my mother when she was mad. Out here I'm just Hawk, got the nickname in Vietnam flying rescue choppers, and it's stuck. These days, I'm Chief Ranger for Mount Shasta, and after the chaos of war, this isolated peak in Northern California became my sanctuary. Or at least it was, until last fall. That evening in October 1985, I was finishing my final check of the fire watchtowers before winter closure. The sunset cast the whole mountain in a deep red glow, but something about it felt wrong. The clouds swirled around the peak in patterns I'd never seen in my 15 years on this mountain. They moved like they had a mind of their own, circling the summit like hungry wolves. I stood there, radio in hand, trying to call in my position to base. Nothing but static. Radio problems had been happening more often lately. Not just for us rangers, but everyone around the mountain. Phones cutting out, TV signals scrambling, even car batteries dying for no reason. "Damn equipment," I muttered, slapping the radio against my palm. But deep down, I knew it wasn't the equipment. Something was happening to our mountain on my drive. Back down, I passed Bill Henley's cattle ranch. Bill was standing at his fence, face grim as stone. I pulled over. "Lost another 3 last night," he said before I could even ask. "Same as the others. Organs removed clean, like with a laser. No blood anywhere." I'd seen the mutilated cattle myself. Nothing in nature does that. No predator I know cuts with surgical precision and leaves no tracks. "Sheriff still saying it's coyotes?" I asked. Bill spat on the ground. "Sheriff's a fool. Whatever's doing this ain't natural." He wasn't wrong. The cattle mutilations were just the beginning. Over the past few months, hikers had gone missing on perfectly clear nights. Experienced ones too, people who knew the mountain like their own backyard. Always during full moons, always without a trace. Then there were the lights, strange, fast-moving. Lights that shot across the sky, stopped suddenly, then zoomed off at angles no aircraft could manage. I'd seen them myself 3 times now. The Wintu tribe, whose lands these were long before white settlers arrived, had cancelled their annual mountain ceremony. First time in 200 years, according to Jacob, my estranged brother who'd recently returned, as their spiritual advisor. When I asked him why, he just shook his head. The mountain is speaking. We need to listen. As I pulled up to my cabin near the timberline, the radio suddenly crackled to life. Hawk. It was Megan O'Connor, my assistant ranger, former NASA scientist who'd been reassigned after blowing the whistle on something classified. Smart as a whip, and the only person I trusted completely out here. Go ahead, I answered. You need to see this. North Ridge, about 2 miles in. Bring your camera. What am I looking at? There was a pause. I don't know how to explain it. Just come. An hour later, I stood beside Megan at the edge of what should have been dense forest. Instead, we faced a perfect circle of flattened trees, hundreds of them laid down like matchsticks, all pointing outward from the center, as if something massive had pressed down from above. This wasn't here 3 days ago, Megan said quietly. I checked this area on Monday. I took photos, measured the circle, nearly 200 feet across. No tracks leading in or out. No burn marks. Just trees snapped at the base and pressed flat. That night, I had the dream again. The one where I'm lifted into the night sky, unable to move or scream. Only this time, I could see what was carrying me. Enormous wings, spanning wider than my cabin, attached to something I couldn't quite make out. Something that wasn't supposed to exist. I woke up drenched in sweat, the first pale light of dawn filtering through my window. Outside, I heard the crows going crazy, their calls sounding almost like warnings. Something was coming to Mount Shasta, something ancient, something hungry, and somehow I knew it was coming for us all. My cabin sits just below where the trees stop growing on Mount Shasta. It's nothing fancy, 2 rooms, a bathroom and a porch that gives me a view of the valleys below. But it's home. Inside, the walls tell my story. My mother's Wintu artwork hangs beside my Vietnam medals and chopper photos. 2 parts of me that never quite fit together, like puzzle pieces from different boxes. That morning, I sat at my kitchen table cleaning my service revolver, a habit from my military days that helps me think. My hands remembered the moves while my mind wandered back to the flattened trees and the dream. The knock at my door made me jump. It was Megan holding 2 cups of coffee from the general store 15 miles down the mountain. Thought you might need this, she said, handing me a cup. You look like you didn't sleep much. Megan O'Connor doesn't miss much. She's smart in a way that makes most people uncomfortable. NASA's loss was my gain. When they reassigned her here after she spoke up about something they wanted, kept quiet. She never told me what it was, and I never asked. Out. Here, everyone has secrets. The nightmare again, she asked, taking a seat across from me. I nodded, sipping the hot coffee. Worse this time. I could see wings. Her eyes widened slightly, but she didn't laugh or dismiss it. That's what I appreciate about Megan. She listens. I've been charting the strange events, she said, pulling out a map covered in colored. Pins. Red for cattle mutilations, blue for missing hikers, yellow for light sightings. Look at the pattern. The pins formed an uneven circle around the mountain's peak, with most clustered around the north face, right where we'd found the flattened trees. Something's focusing on this area, I said, and the timing isn't random either. Everything happens on a lunar cycle. Before she could explain further, my radio crackled. Chief Thompson, it was the park office. Your brother's here to see you. I groaned. Jacob and I hadn't spoken properly in years, not since he left for college and I enlisted. Now he was back, a respected elder in our mother's tribe, despite being only 43. "Send him up," I replied. 30 minutes later, Jacob's old truck pulled up. He looked older than when I'd last seen him. His hair now had grey streaks, and lines creased the corners of his eyes, but he still moved like a much younger man. "Robert," he said, using my full name as always. "Jacob," I replied. "What brings you up here?" He looked at Megan, then back to me. "I need to show you something." "Alone?" Megan took the hint. "I'll check those trail cameras we set up yesterday," she said, gathering her things. As she left, she gave me a look that said, "Be nice." Once she was gone, Jacob didn't waste time. "Have you been having the dreams? About being taken up?" The coffee cup nearly slipped from my hand. "How did you know that?" "Because grandfather had the same dreams, and his father before him." Jacob pulled out a small leather pouch from his jacket. "I've been going through grandfather's things. Found this." Inside was a journal, its leather cover cracked with age. I flipped it open to see our grandfather's neat handwriting filling the yellowed pages. "Read page 47, Jacob said. I turned to it and felt my blood run cold. April 18th, 1924. They came again last night. The sky people. They lifted me from my bed to study me as before. I saw their true form this time. They are the thunderbirds of our legends, but not as we imagined them. They exist between worlds, watching, collecting. They have marked our family, for reasons I cannot understand. I fear what this means for my children and their children after them." "This is crazy," I said, but my hand went unconsciously to my back, where the recurring nightmare always left me feeling sore. "Is it?" Jacob asked. "Take off your shirt." "What? Just do it, Robert." Reluctantly, I removed my flannel shirt. Jacob moved behind me and placed his hand between my shoulder blades. "You have a mark here, don't you? A birthmark shaped like a feather?" I turned to stare at him. "How did you know that?" He removed his own shirt and turned. There, in the same spot as mine, was an identical mark. "We're chosen, brother, just like grandfather was. The Thunderbirds are returning, and they're calling to their marked ones." Before I could respond, the door flew open. Megan stood there, breathing hard, like she'd been running. "You need to see this," she gasped. "Walter's here with something impossible." Walter Richmond ran the local newspaper, though most folks around here considered him a conspiracy nut. But the look on Megan's face told me this wasn't one of Walter's usual wild stories. Outside, Walter was pacing next to his Jeep. When he saw me, he rushed over. "Chief Thompson, thank God you're here. I found this." He thrust something toward me. It was a feather, but not like any feather I'd ever seen. It was over 3 feet long, with an iridescent black surface that seemed to shift colors in the light. It felt both light and impossibly solid in my hands. "Where did you get this?" I asked. "Up near Devil's Peak," Walter said. "There's more. I got pictures of military helicopters up there last night. No lights, black paint. They're watching something, Hawk, and they don't want anyone to know about it." Jacob took the feather from my hands, his face going pale. "It's starting," he whispered. "The Thunderbirds are coming back." As if on cue, every electronic device around us, Walter's camera, Megan's GPS, my radio, shut down at once. In the sudden silence, we could hear a strange humming coming from the mountain above. The thing about fear is how it builds, not all at once, but little by little, like water rising in a locked room. Standing there with the giant feather, surrounded by people looking to me for answers I didn't have, I felt the water reaching my chin. We sent the feather to a lab friend of Megan's in Sacramento. I didn't expect much. Maybe it belonged to some rare bird or was a fake. Deep down, though, I knew better. 3 days later, Megan burst into my office, waving a fax. "The lab results are back," she said, her voice shaking a little. "Hawk, they can't identify it. The cellular structure doesn't match any known species. They're saying it's what? Impossible. The cells have properties they've never seen before. The genetic material doesn't match any bird on Earth. Let that sink in. What does that mean exactly? It means whatever this came from isn't in any scientific record. She hesitated. There's more. The feather gives off a low level of radiation. Nothing dangerous, but definitely not normal. Outside my window, dark clouds gathered over the mountain peak, even though the weather report had promised clear skies. All week. Something's happening up there, I said. We need to check it out. The higher we drove up the mountain road, the stranger things got. My watch stopped working at around 8,000 feet. The compass in my pocket spun in circles. Megan's fancy electronic equipment went haywire, then died completely. This isn't normal electromagnetic interference, she muttered, trying to restart her devices. It's like something is sucking all the power out of everything. We parked where the road ended and continued on foot. The air felt heavy, like right before a thunderstorm, but the sky above us was now strangely clear. Only around the peak did clouds still swirl, forming shapes that almost looked deliberate. About a mile in, we found the first dead animal, a deer lying in a small clearing. From a distance it looked like it was sleeping, but up close, the horror was clear. No visible wounds, but when I gently pressed its side, the body gave way like it was filled with liquid. Its insides are melted, I said, pulling my hand back. Megan knelt down, careful not to touch it. Look at the ground. Around the deer was a perfect circle where the grass had withered and turned brown. About 10 feet away was another circle with a dead rabbit. Beyond that, more circles, each with a dead animal in the center. They're arranged in a pattern, Megan said, her scientific mind still working despite the grim scene. Concentric circles like ripples in a pond. We photographed everything and took samples, though I wasn't sure what good it would do. As we worked, the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the trees. That's when we heard it. A sound like huge wings beating against the air, but distant, as if coming from miles away or underwater. We should go, I said, suddenly very sure we didn't want to be on this part of the mountain after dark. Back at my cabin, Jacob was waiting, his old pickup truck parked out front. With him was an elder from the tribe, a woman named Sarah, whose weathered face held more wisdom than any book. You went up the mountain, she said. It wasn't a question. Yes, I admitted. And you found death in circles. I stared at her. How did you know that? Because it happened before. When the thunderbirds feed, they take what they need and discard the rest. The life force leaves these creatures, and their bodies return to the elements more quickly. Feed? Megan asked. What exactly are these things? Jacob and Sarah exchanged glances. Come with us, Jacob said. There's something you need to see. They took us to a cave deep in the forest, one I'd never known existed despite my years exploring the mountain. Inside, ancient paintings covered the walls, images of giant winged figures descending from the sky. Below them, tiny human figures held their arms up, some appearing to float toward the winged beings. Our people have known about them for thousands of years, Sarah explained, her voice echoing softly in the cave. They come from beyond the sky, from what you might call another dimension. They appear when the boundaries between worlds grow thin. And they take people? I asked, thinking of the missing hikers. They harvest, Jacob corrected. Sometimes it's animals, sometimes plants or minerals, and yes, sometimes people. For what purpose? Megan asked. To survive, Sarah said simply. Their world is dying. They take what they need from ours. I thought about my recurring nightmare, about being lifted into the sky, about the birthmark on my back. And us? I asked quietly. Why are we marked? Sarah touched my shoulder gently. Some humans are compatible with them in ways others are not. The marks show those who could survive the crossing between worlds. A cold feeling crept up my spine. Are you saying they want to take us back with Them. Before she could answer, my radio crackled to life, which shouldn't have been possible given how dead it had been all day. Chief Thompson? The voice was distorted but recognizable as one of my junior rangers. We've got a situation. Walter Richmond's been found. He's alive, but something's wrong with him. Where? I asked. Hospital in Mount Ridge. Doctor says you should come right away. At the small regional hospital, we found Walter lying in a bed, eyes open but vacant. He stared at the ceiling, mumbling the same sequence of numbers over and over. He was found wandering on the north slope, the doctor told us. No physical injuries, but he's been like this since they brought him in. We've tried to reach his family, but he doesn't seem to have any. I leaned closer. Walter, it's Hawk. Can you hear me? His eyes flickered toward me, showing a moment of recognition. They're counting, he whispered. Always counting. The stars, the numbers, the harvest times. What happened to you out there? I asked. Saw them, taking samples. Not ready for the main harvest yet. His hand shot out, grabbing my wrist with surprising strength. Binary stars. That's where they come from. The numbers are the coordinates. Megan had been jotting down the number sequence Walter kept repeating. Now she looked up, her face pale. Hawk, these aren't random. This is a genuine binary star coordinate system. These are actual locations in deep space. That night, as we drove back to the mountain, the sky opened up. A total lunar eclipse had begun, though none had been predicted by any astronomical calendar. As the moon slowly darkened, something moved across its face. Something huge, with wings that seemed to span the width of the mountain. Tell me you. See that? I whispered to Megan, who had pulled over to stare up at the sky. I see it, she said, her voice faint. God help me, I see it. For just a moment, the thing was silhouetted perfectly against the blood-red moon, a massive winged figure. That was neither bird nor bat nor anything I'd ever seen before. Then it was gone, leaving only the darkened moon and the feeling that we were being watched by something ancient and hungry. Sarah's words echoed in my mind. They appear when the boundaries between worlds grow thin. The boundary was thinning now, and whatever waited on the other side was getting ready to cross over. The next morning, Megan and I headed back up the mountain. This time we brought better gear, cameras, sample bags, and an old Geiger counter I'd borrowed from the fire department. We need to be smart about this, I said as we hiked. Whatever's happening, it's bigger than us. You believe it now? Megan asked. About the Thunderbirds? I wasn't sure what I believed anymore. 20 years as a ranger, I'd seen plenty of strange things in nature, but nothing like this. The scientist in Megan was still fighting it too, I could tell. I believe something is here, I said finally. Something that shouldn't be. The Geiger counter started clicking as we climbed higher, the sound getting faster with each step. This can't be right, Megan said, checking the device. These radiation levels aren't dangerous, but they're way above normal background radiation. We followed the increasing radiation to a hidden plateau I'd never noticed before, despite knowing this mountain like the back of my hand. It was as if the plateau had simply appeared. In the center stood a perfect circle of stones, each about the size of a basketball. They weren't local rock. They had a bluish tint I'd never seen on Mount Shasta. These stones aren't from here, I said, kneeling. To examine one, they're not even weathered. It's like they were just placed here. Megan was looking at the plants growing within the stone circle. They were ordinary mountain species, pine saplings, wildflowers, moss, but they were wrong somehow. Hawk, look at these plants. This pine sapling, it should be just a few inches tall at this elevation, but it's nearly 2 feet. And these flowers are showing years of adaptation to higher elevation. It's like they're evolving right in front of us. The Geiger counter went crazy as she stepped into the circle. In the center, the ground had been disturbed recently. Someone's been digging here, I said, crouching down. The soil had been carefully removed and replaced, but the difference in color gave it away. Or something, Megan replied. I used a small folding shovel to dig, and about 2 feet down, hit something solid. Carefully, we uncovered it. A perfectly smooth black box, about the size of a loaf of bread. No seams, no openings, just a solid rectangle that felt warm to the touch. What is it? I asked. Megan shook her head. I've never seen anything like it, but the radiation is coming from inside. Suddenly, the box hummed, and a seam appeared along one edge. Before we could react, it opened slightly, releasing a soft blue light. We should back away, I said, pulling Megan's arm. The humming got louder and the light brighter. Then just as suddenly it stopped, the box closed and went silent. I think it was scanning us, Megan whispered, or signaling to something. We reburied the box and marked the location. As we were preparing to leave the plateau, 3 black helicopters appeared over the ridge, unmarked and flying low. We ducked into the trees just as they passed overhead, landing somewhere further up the mountain. Government, I muttered. Walter was right. By the time we made it back to my cabin, the sun was setting. Jacob was waiting for us, his face grim. You went to the stone circle, he said. How did you? Because I was told you would. In here, he tapped his temple. The dreams are getting stronger. They're talking to me now, to us. My nightmares had indeed gotten worse. Now I remembered details. Owlish eyes studying me, long fingers taking samples of skin and blood, and always those massive wings beating against the night sky. What do they want, Jacob? To survive. Their world is dying, a dimension parallel to ours but fading. They need new genetic material to adapt. And the government knows? Megan asked. They've known since the 1940s. They have an agreement, limited harvesting rights in exchange for technology. I thought about the missing hikers, the mutilated cattle. That's why no serious investigation ever happens. Jacob nodded. But something's changed. The Thunderbirds are taking more than agreed. The government team is here to control the situation. That night I couldn't sleep. Around midnight I stepped outside to get some air. The sky was clear except for a strange aurora-like light dancing around the mountain peak. As I watched, the lights formed into what looked like a massive bird with its wings spread. The radio on my belt crackled. Hawk, you seeing this? It was Megan. Yeah, where are you? Observation point 3, looking right at the peak. Stay there. I'm coming to you. I drove up to the observation point, a small clearing with a good view of the north face. Megan was there with her camera, taking photos of the light show. It's some kind of energy field, she said as I approached. Look how it's concentrated right where we found the stone circle. Through her binoculars, I could see small figures moving on the plateau. Men in dark uniforms, setting up equipment pointed at the sky, not the ground. They're waiting for something, I said. As if on cue, the lights intensified. A beam shot down from the center of the formation, touching the ground exactly at the stone circle. The men scattered as something began to materialize in the beam. Oh my God, Megan whispered. Through the binoculars, I could make out a shape forming, tall, at least 8 feet, with a body like a human, but features that reminded me of an owl or hawk. Huge wings unfurled from its back, spanning at least 20 feet. We need to get closer, I said. Are you crazy? That thing, I need to know, Megan. I need to see them up close. She looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, but we stay hidden. We took a hiking trail that would bring us within a quarter mile of the plateau, then went off trail, moving as quietly as possible through the dense forest. As we got closer, we could hear a low humming sound that made my teeth ache. From our hiding spot behind a large boulder, we could see everything. 3 of the beings now stood in the stone circle. They wore no clothes, but their bodies were covered in what looked like short feathers. Their faces were mostly human, but with large round eyes and beaks where noses should be. The government team had regrouped and surrounded them, weapons raised. One man stepped forward, clearly the leader, and raised his hand in greeting. The tallest of the beings tilted its head, then raised its own hand. A ball of blue light formed between them, growing until it was about the size of a beach ball. Images flashed within it, star maps, DNA strands, geological formations. "They're communicating," Megan whispered. Suddenly, I felt a presence in my mind, alien but somehow familiar. Images flashed through my thoughts. The Thunderbird's homeworld, a dying planet orbiting a binary star system. Their species, once numerous, now reduced to a few hundred. Their desperate need for genetic material to prevent extinction. And then, more personal images. My grandfather meeting them in the 1920s, my own birth, the mark on my back being placed there while I was still in my mother's womb. I gasped as the connection broke. The leader of the beings had turned its head and was looking directly at our hiding place. "It knows we're here," I whispered. "It's been in my head. We need to go," Megan said urgently. "Now!" But it was too late. One of the government team had spotted us and was shouting, pointing in our direction. The others turned, raising their weapons. The Thunderbird leader made a sound, a high-pitched screech that hurt my ears. The blue ball of light expanded suddenly, engulfing the entire plateau in blindingly bright light. When I could see again, the government team was scattered on the ground. Some were moving, others weren't. The Thunderbirds were gone, and Megan was lying beside me, unnaturally still, a small trickle of blood running from her nose. "Megan!" I shook her gently. Her pulse was there, but weak. "Hang on, I'll get you help." As I lifted her, a shadow fell over us. I looked up to see one of the Thunderbirds hovering above, its massive wings barely moving as it stayed suspended in the air, its large eyes fixed on Megan, then on me. A voice spoke in my mind, deep and ancient. "She is damaged. We can repair her." A beam of light enveloped us both, and I felt my feet leaving the ground. The last thing I remember was Megan being taken from my arms as we rose higher and higher toward a craft I couldn't quite see, something massive that somehow stayed hidden against the night sky, and then darkness. I woke up on the forest floor, my head pounding. The sun was just rising, which meant I'd been unconscious for hours. Megan was gone. "Megan!" I shouted, my voice echoing through the trees. No answer. I staggered to my feet, trying to piece together what had happened. The memories came back in flashes. The Thunderbirds, the government team, Megan hurt, and then being lifted into the air. My radio was dead. My watch stopped. I had no choice but to make my way back down the mountain on foot. As I walked, I noticed something strange. A path of plants growing at incredible speed. Flowers bloomed and died in minutes. Saplings shot up to become young trees before my eyes. "The barrier is breaking down," said a voice behind me. I spun around to find Jacob standing there, looking exhausted. His clothes were torn, and a fresh wound crossed his cheek. "What happened to you?" I asked. "I followed you last night, saw everything. When they took you and Megan up, the soldiers spotted me. I barely got away." He looked up at the sky. "The Thunderbird's presence is affecting our world. The boundary between dimensions is collapsing." "What does that mean?" "It means both worlds could be destroyed if it isn't fixed, and soon." Back at my cabin, more bad news waited. The TV showed emergency broadcasts about strange weather patterns across the region. Unexplained lights in the sky, electronics failing, animals behaving oddly. "It's starting," Jacob said grimly. "We need to complete the binding ritual. It's the only way to seal the rift." "What about Megan?" "She's with them now, in their craft. We have to get her back." Jacob shook his head. "The ritual comes first. If the dimensional barrier collapses completely, none of us will survive." I grabbed my brother by his shirt. "I'm not leaving her with those things. They're not hurting her, Robert," he said calmly. "They're healing her. I can sense it. But they need her for something else too." What? A bridge. A genetic bridge between our species. My blood ran cold as I remembered Walter's words in the hospital. The harvest times. We gathered what we needed for the ritual. Sacred herbs from Jacob's truck, our grandfather's journal, and an old knife that had been in our family for generations. As we prepared to head up the mountain again, a military helicopter roared overhead. "They're bringing in more men," I said. "Heavy weapons too, from the looks of it." "They'll try to capture a Thunderbird," Jacob replied. "It won't work. They don't understand what they're dealing with." We took my jeep as far as we could, then continued on foot. The mountain had changed overnight. Strange plants grew everywhere, some with glowing blue veins running through their leaves. The air felt charged, like just before a lightning strike. We reached the stone circle to find it expanded to twice its previous size. The black helicopters were landed nearby, and armed soldiers surrounded the area. They had set up some kind of energy weapon aimed at the sky. "We're too late," Jacob whispered. "They're trying to force the Thunderbirds to land." As if on cue, the sky darkened, not with clouds, but with something else. A massive shape blocking out the sun. A craft slowly became visible, its surface shifting like liquid metal, shaped, roughly, like a giant arrowhead. The soldiers raised their weapons. The leader shouted orders into a radio. "They're going to fire on it," I said. "We have to stop them." Before we could move, the energy weapon powered up with a high whine. A beam of intense blue light shot toward the craft. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the craft's surface rippled. The beam seemed to be absorbed, drawn into the strange metal. Suddenly, the beam reversed direction, shooting back toward the weapon with 10 times the intensity. The energy weapon exploded, sending soldiers flying. The ground shook beneath our feet. "The rift," Jacob shouted, pointing to the center of the stone circle. The air was tearing open, like fabric ripping down the middle. Through the tear I could see another world. Red skies, massive structures, and mountains that floated above the ground. The Thunderbird craft descended through the opening, hovering just above the stone circle. A hatch opened in its underside, and a beam of light touched the ground. 3 Thunderbirds descended in the beam, their wings folded against their backs. Behind them came Megan, walking strangely, her eyes unfocused. "Megan!" I called out, running toward her despite Jacob trying to hold me back. The soldiers, who could still move, raised their weapons again. Their leader shouted for them to hold fire, but one panicked and shot anyway. The bullet hit one of the Thunderbirds, causing it to screech in pain. Everything happened at once after that. The wounded Thunderbird released a pulse of energy that knocked everyone to the ground. The rift began expanding rapidly, the edges of our world seeming to curl into the opening like paper caught in a flame. "The ritual, Robert!" Jacob shouted over the chaos. "It has to be now!" He began chanting words from our grandfather's journal, cutting his palm with the family knife and letting the blood drip onto the ground. I saw the soldiers regrouping, preparing to attack again. I had to make a choice: help Jacob complete the ritual, or try to reach Megan. I looked at my brother, then at Megan. "I'm sorry, Jacob." I ran toward Megan as Jacob continued the ritual alone. The Thunderbirds turned to watch me approach, their large eyes unblinking. "Give her back," I shouted. The tallest one, their leader, tilted its head. That now familiar presence touched my mind again. "She carries the future now," the voice said in my thoughts. "A bridge between our worlds." I looked at Megan more closely. Her hand rested protectively over her stomach. "You made her pregnant?" I asked, horrified. "Made new life?" The voice corrected. "Neither fully human nor fully Thunderbird. A new species that can survive in both worlds. It was foretold. It is why your family has been marked for generations." Behind me, Jacob's chanting grew louder. The rift was starting to close, but too slowly. The military leader was shouting into a radio for air support. "You have to leave," I told the Thunderbird. "Now, before they bring more weapons." "We cannot." The rift must be fully closed from both sides. Someone must go through to complete the sealing. I understood then why Jacob had said I had to choose. Someone had to stay behind in our world to finish the ritual. Someone else had to go through to the Thunderbird's world to close it from their side. "Take me," I said. "Let Megan stay." The Thunderbird studied me for a long moment. "The ritual requires blood of the marked ones. You and your brother are the last." I looked back at Jacob, still chanting as the rift slowly shrank, then at Megan, standing in a trance-like state. "Wake her up," I demanded. "Let me talk to her." The leader made a gesture and Megan's eyes cleared. She looked around in confusion, then saw me. "Hawk, what's happening?" Her hand remained on her stomach, protecting what was growing inside her. I explained quickly what needed to be done. "I have to go with them, Megan, to close the rift from their side. Jacob needs to stay here to complete this side." "No!" Tears filled her eyes. "There has to be another way." "There isn't, but I promise you this. I'll find a way back." I touched her stomach gently. "I'll find a way back to both of you." In the distance, the sound of more helicopters approached. The military reinforcements were coming. "Go to Jacob," I told Megan. "Help him finish the ritual. Keep our world safe." Tears streaming down her face, she nodded and ran toward my brother. I turned to the Thunderbird leader. "I'm ready." As Megan reached Jacob, the Thunderbirds surrounded me, their wings unfurled, massive and beautiful. The beam of light enveloped us, and I felt myself rising toward their craft. The last thing I saw was Jacob and Megan completing the ritual. Their blood mingling on the sacred ground as they chanted the ancient words. The rift began closing faster, the edges of reality knitting back together. Then I was inside the Thunderbird craft, watching through a transparent section as my world and everyone I loved disappeared from view, as the rift sealed completely. 3 months later, Megan O'Connor stood at the edge of the stone circle. The government had covered up the incident as a gas leak and forest fire. Most people believed it, or pretended to. She knew better. Her growing belly was proof enough. Jacob had taken over as unofficial guardian of the mountain, teaching her what he knew about the Thunderbirds and the spaces between worlds. The mountain had returned mostly to normal. Those strange plants still grew near the stone circle, and electronics still failed nearby. Sometimes at night, when the moon was full, Megan would climb to the circle and wait. Sometimes, she thought, she could feel Hawk reaching out from across the dimensions, his consciousness brushing against hers. On this particular night, as she stood with her hand on her swelling stomach, a sudden wind swept across the circle. The stones hummed with energy. Above, the clouds parted to reveal a perfect circle of stars, and flying across that circle, just for a moment, was the silhouette of something with enormous wings. "He found a way," Megan whispered to her unborn child. "Just like he promised." Years later, a teenage boy stood in that same spot during a thunderstorm. His eyes reflected the lightning unnaturally, pupils expanding like a bird of praise. Above him, something circled, its massive wings beating against the storm winds. The boy smiled and spread his arms. Behind him, small wings, not yet fully grown, unfurled from his shoulder blades. His father had found a way back after all, not as fully human anymore, but as something new, something that could exist in both worlds. As the winged shape descended, toward him, the boy's eyes filled with tears of joy. His father had kept his promise, and the legacy of the Thunderbirds would continue, bridging two worlds that once thought themselves separate, but were always meant to be connected.